Hello, everyone. We need this for the board study session of May 27, 2021. It's now 6:12. We'll begin roll call, please, Mary.
President Lay,
Here.
Vice President Herrera,
Here.
Clerk Chavez. Here. Member Cortese.
Here.
Member Doe.
Here.
All right. Welcome to the board study session of May 27, 2021. Member of the public, please submit your public comment online by accessing the form on the district's homepage at www.esuhsd.org or the link on the agenda. Please limit your written comments to no more than 1,000 characters in length. Public comments submitted online will be read into the record. You may also raise your virtual hand in Zoom to request to speak. You have 2 minutes to speak. Please note all meetings are recorded. All regular and special meetings of the board trustee and board study session are streamed live on meeting nights and are also available for viewing the day after the meeting by accessing the district YouTube channel listed on the district webpage at www.esuhsd.org under the quick link section. The board is not able to respond to items that are not on the agenda or any personnel issues. Your comment will be read into the record and will be directed to the superintendent and or the appropriate staff member for response. Interpretation of this meeting in Spanish and Vietnamese can be heard by accessing the link and following the instruction shown on the agenda and the district website. Before we move to adoption of the agenda, I would like to take a minute for a moment of silence to grieve and pray along with the family of the 9 victims we lost due to VTA shooting yesterday. We are all overwhelmed by the senseless shooting. There's no word to describe the poignant and heartache that this tragedy has caused to the families and friends of these 9 souls. We are devastated to learn that 2 of these 9 was Eastside graduates. As our city and our school district mourn and find our path to process this tragedy, we, the board of Eastside Union High School District, would like to take a moment to read and remember the name and age of the 9 souls we have lost. They are Paul de la Cruz Milla, 42 years old, and he also graduated at Mount Pleasant in 1997. Next person, Patty.
Aptijit Singh, 36.
Adrián Belleza, 29, 2010, YB alum.
Jose de Jesus Hernandez, 35 years of age.
Timothy Michael Romo, 49 years of age.
Michael Joseph Rudametkin, age 40.
Abdul Wahab Alagmandan, 63.
Lars Kepler Lane, age 63.
Alex Ward Fritsch, age 49.
So can we take a moment of silence to remember those 9 souls? A moment of silence, and thank you, everyone. I know that City Hall also has the visual light candle. Unfortunately, we cannot be there, so we start our board meeting with the moment of silence. So the next step is we will adoption of agenda 3.01. The superintendent and the board members may request that items to be removed from the agenda for consideration and or carry to a future board meeting for consideration and or action. I think we have none, so it's moving to 4.01. Presentation and or discussion regarding the Uniform Behavior Response Matrix, UBR Focus Group. Dr. Shanice Power, Director of Student Services, Teresa Marquez, Associate Superintendent of Educational Services. Please take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. I do just want to point out that I believe we have some focus group members on the attendee side of the Zoom. I'm not sure if we have tech here to bring them over into the panelist side to ensure that we have the representation of the folks who agreed to be part of the panel, but were unable to be in person. If you are in the attendees, but were meant to be one of the panelists, could you please raise your hand in the Zoom and our tech will bring you in as a panelist. Okay, I see Mr. McCoy's been brought forth, and I believe we have another student as well. Thank you. So at the board's request, as a result of the board presentation that we did around our uniform behavior responses session, I believe it was last Thursday. My days are merging here. They wanted to make sure that we engaged a little bit deeper into the work of our uniform behavior responses. So in front of you, just to orient you to the documents as we progress through our discussion, is you have the uniform behavior response presentation or slides that was presented and posted onto our board docs at the May meeting, at this previous May meeting. You also have the most current revised UBR chart, which is a single page. And then you also have in front of you the presentation that was done to the board back in January 14th of this year around our key performance measures that were specifically connected to our behavior data. And so wanted to present that to you for some further context in relation to the UBR. And finally, what you have as a single page as well is the California standards for the teaching profession, so that you're able to see the connection between the work that we're hoping to bring about as a result of the development of the uniform behavior response matrix. And so those are the documents that you have in front of you. Before we get into just pieces of the document, I want to just give you a little bit of history as to what got us to this point here. And so I begin with just even years from when I was a classroom teacher back at Silver Creek High School, math teacher, having, and some of you who've been here for a long time probably remember this, a very black and white discipline matrix, which is what we used to call it, that was posted in our classrooms. And so for all intents and purposes, as a school district, and most school districts around us have some sort of discipline matrix, some sort of document that lists out what student behaviors are potentially impacting the instructional environment of our students and what those consequences or responses were. And so we've always had some semblance of a document that outlined discipline practices, discipline consequences and responses to inappropriate teenage student behavior. As we've been looking at our data throughout those years, we have consistently and historically seen a trend of disproportionality within our outcomes when it comes to suspension rates, behavior referrals, and then most recently back, I believe it was in 2017 or 2018, there was a filing against the district specific to the inequitable practices exercised when responding to student behavior. And so we entered into an agreement with the Office for Civil Rights to respond to not only that particular complaint formulated by a parent and a student, but which then triggered a further investigation into our data that then found us to be inconsistent with many of our responses to student behavior, where it asked us to really take a deeper dive into our discipline data, and specifically the behavior referrals, our suspension rates, our expulsion rates, and how we were communicating with our students and parents, particularly our parents who are limited English proficient. And so as a result of that agreement that we entered into the Office for Civil Rights, one of the expectations was that we develop and implement policy that would, as a system, allow us to have more consistent practices and approaches to student behavior. As part of those policies, one of the components that we felt was essential to being able to adhere to the policies was to take a look again and revise our uniform behavior response matrix. And so with the agreement from the Office for Civil Rights, and as part of the agreement with the Office for Civil Rights, we developed a stakeholder equity committee group, which was the initial group back in 2018, who there are some members from that original committee here present with us, where they began looking and examining our data, as well as what we needed to do to put in place a document, a guide, a tool, a matrix that consisted of specific interventions we would put in place as we approached and shifted from a punitive approach to inappropriate teenage behavior to a more restorative, relationship-centered approach to how we responded to student behavior. And so when we went into the first iteration of that revision, it was brought to the board for information as part of the overarching presentation around discipline data, around our work that we were moving forward. Most recently, with the addition of Dr. Powell to our Ed Services team and our continued partnership with the Office for Civil Rights, there's still some elements from within the agreement that we need to continue to address. Board policies that are specific to discipline, and uniform behavior response that would allow us to put in practice those policies. We didn't bring the policies forth to the board just yet because we felt that it was imperative for us to first bring the actual practice tool that would allow us to then adhere and follow those board policies. And so what we presented to the board, and so I referred to you first to the PowerPoint or the slides that are titled Uniform Behavior Responses. What we attempted to do in presenting at a regular board meeting so that not only was our board, but our community was informed of our connection to the overarching work that we're doing around building equitable communities. So I'm not going to go through each of the slides, but I do just want to point out that our goal with bringing forth the UBR is to be completely transparent about the work that we're trying to do across our system when it comes to building equitable communities. And so when Dr. Powell presented, she presented not only the UBR in itself, but she presented the various evidence and research that supports shifting from a punitive approach to responding to student behavior to a more restorative, relationship-centered approach to working with student behavior. In addition, we brought forth the various input from the stakeholders, where in some cases there was complete alignment with the UBR, and in some cases there was just some pending concerns that we brought forth to the board so that we were fully transparent as to what were some of those pending issues that we still needed to address. Specifically, as part of this, I know I've mentioned that the initial driver was our agreement with the Office for Civil Rights. But I do want to point out that that's not really the lens that we're looking at this through from Ed Services. We're looking at it from a response to the data that we have. And so the January 4th thicker packet that you have there clearly delineates the data that we have as a district that points to a need for us to just do better with how we respond to student behavior in the most simplest terms. And so for us, it's about responding to the needs that are exhibited as is evidenced by the data. And even now, more importantly, responding to the needs that have surfaced and been further elevated and aggravated with the pandemic. We recognize that we've been over a year not in person in our classrooms. There's been various experiences that our students have undergone, from loss due to the pandemic to just a basic loss of just essential needs, such as food, housing, loss of interaction with other people. And so that's going to require us even more so now to put forth clear, consistent practices and approaches to how we're going to respond to the various needs that our students are going to come with. We recognize as a Net Services team that this is not going to be easy work. We recognize as a Net Services team that we are not just putting this on teachers. We recognize that as a Net Services team, there's going to be a lot of building of capacity that's going to have to happen, and we're prepared to do that. We're prepared to engage with our stakeholders to not only take recommendations on the uniform behavior responses, but to also take input and recommendations as to what is the best approach for building the capacity across our system to ensure that our students' needs are met. On June 3rd, I'm going to bring forth the Local Control Accountability Plan. And one of the major elements that is going to be listed throughout our LCAP is the need for social, emotional, mental health, and overall well-being. And so the LCAP you're going to see is going to strictly address that. In addition, of course, to our academic support that we have to provide to our students. But I say this to bring to this group that this is not a work in isolation. This is not something on the side. This is something that is connected to our work around multi-tier systems of support that's going to allow us to be able to bring forth consistent, relationship-centered, restorative approaches. Now, having said that, I recognize that it's a shift for a lot of us. Transition and change take time. And so we don't intend for this to be an overnight shift, an overnight one-time thing that just gets dumped on teachers, on staff, on administration. We recognize it's going to be a work in progress. We recognize that it's going to have to allow us to engage with a number of different stakeholders to continue to revise it, amend it, recognize the needs that surface as a result of us moving forward with this. And then I also want to recognize that some of the input that we received that was not in alignment with this talked about teachers being content area experts and needing that additional support to work with behavior. And so one of the reasons why I included the standards for the teaching profession was to give the full context of what the scope of a teacher's work is. Yes, in high school, content is very much important. We get our single subject credentials. I'm a math teacher. I will always be a math teacher. That is my content. I don't like commas. I don't like apostrophes. I don't know where semicolons go. But if you look as a whole at the standards for the teaching profession, it calls out more than just content. And so I point to you standard 2, creating and maintaining effective environments for student learning. And that clearly outlines that part of the role of a teacher, of a math teacher, is to ensure that the learning environments are conducive to learning and that we're addressing the behavior of our students. As inappropriate as it may be, we're addressing the behavior so that we can shift the behavior so that our kids have access to being able to graduate and so that we then are able to fulfill our promise of college and career readiness. And so I wanted to just give you the context, the story of where I'm coming from, so that then we can now engage in open discussion and continue to look at what are still those pain points that we need to address to ensure that as we come out of here, we can speak to bright spots that are going to propel the work forward. Thank you. I'll open it up and return it back to the board so that you can open it up for discussion.
Madam President?
Yeah, go ahead, Board Member Manuel Herrera.
That was a great introductory framing of this. And I'm looking forward to the conversation we're going to have tonight. Part of which is different for me is that it's in a focus group format this time, not a presentation before the board and 2-3 minutes for comments at the podium. This is a different way to engage this, and I think it's going to add value to proceeding with this. And I am moved by the depth and interdisciplinary nature and in the systemic interrelatedness of everything that's on the table with UBR and its broader context that you just outlined. I was picking up some of the key points you were making right now, and that is that, back in the day, the discipline matrix that was the norm was pretty simplistic and black and white. And even though the Office of Civil Rights, OCR, the complaint registered there, even though that was, it triggered a response, required a response from our district, yet our local control, our LCAP, which addresses a multi-dimension of our students' needs and district responsibilities, highlights social emotional well-being and the expertise that teachers rightly claim in terms of content and them being the primary authority actually exist in a broader framework, that social emotional well-being and an effective learning environment are also parts of that. And for that, policymakers have a responsibility to clearly lay out how we achieve an effective, more effective learning environment. And I'm going to just start looking at the audience as opposed to you, Teresa Marquez. A more effective approach, and to the extent that the data seems to indicate a default to a punitive approach, and what we're looking for in a new clear standard of practice and policy is one that is restorative and more committed, or I should say even more committed, because there is commitment there already, even more committed to the success of every student. And so I've been appreciating the presentations over time to the board, and I'm aware that the administration has sought comment both formally and informally. I believe that there's been an evolution in how this is framed, how it addresses issues and concerns. And as we move toward a June 3rd decision point, because the board is being asked to not only hear briefings, but to actually put a stake in the ground as a board. Keep looking at me. Being asked to put a stake in the ground as a board to allow this to move forward with even greater support and clarity from the Board of Trustees outward to everyone in our community. And saying that as a policymaker, it's my practice to stay open to ongoing comments. I'm really glad that you mentioned that even with all the work that's been done on this and how it's summarized in these documents, they're great. The work that's gone into these documents is fantastic, and it shows. But I'm glad you mentioned that this is an ongoing process to continue to evolve even more the clarity and the practices and the experience-based, the experiences that are going to be had by people with in and out of the classroom with this kind of a framework. So I sense, when I experience a visionary and encouraging approach to how can we do better for our kids, from punitive to restorative, clarity and consistency, uniformity. I am hearing that, I'm experiencing it, and I'm appreciating it. And right down to the point of voting, my practice is just to stay open. Let's hear what can we learn at every time when we are deliberating, when we are reviewing. And that's why I'm appreciating this evening to have yet another time in this particular format for that purpose.
I really appreciate everyone here tonight. And I know that this board study session would not have it without the, the leadership, as well as the, from our Vice President Manuel Herrera, and also our board member really want to understand, working collaboratively with all stakeholders, from ESTA, from Student Governing Board, from teacher, from staff. Everyone who contributed to UBR. And we also want to acknowledge, administrator have been working very hard and did the presentation last board meeting. And we will bring this item on June 3rd for action to approve. But I think we are here today, so we want to open up and hear from teachers, all stakeholders, because we as a board policy makers, we probably will not understand in depth, some of the issue in the classroom. And we probably will not understand much more from a student on the side of a student governing board, or a student in the classroom. How would they behave? How could we, lift those tense, on the difficult time or challenge time, what they have endured at home during the pandemic. So we be prepared for the next, reopening school in August. So I think this subject is very important. And I know that we all care and took the time, that we're gonna come here today. So I want to open up for all my board colleagues, and after that, we're gonna open up for all stakeholders. So what my, take away from this board study, that we understand more, we communicate more, and we work together collaboratively, so we can support student, teachers, and administrator, so we can achieve our goal. That's what I look forward for tonight board study session. So I want to open up for Lorena Chavez. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Trustee Lee. First, I want to extend my gratitude to staff who has been working a lot on not only putting this together, but going through different iterations, meeting with different stakeholders for a long time now. This UBR is not new. It's been in place. It doesn't need our approval. It's what has to happen. But I think it's important that we talk about it, because even if we know it, even if we've been engaging with this as we go through numerous iterations, especially coming back from the pandemic, it's important that we understand and that we set up everybody, every stakeholder, every entity in this Eastside community to really see the connection, so that they can see the through line, right? I'm a teacher. Here are my standards. This is UBR. This is how it's interconnected, right? Parents, super curious and excited to hear, like literally from in person, like, what does this make you think? What are your hopes coming out of this, right? So that we could listen to each other and be with each other in community. So that tonight is this space for me, at least, because it's no question that conversations and collaboration have been happening ongoing. And I'll end with extra gratitude, if that's even possible, for the lens that we have as a district of supporting our community, our teachers, our students to figure out what does this mean? What does this look like, especially coming back to school from this pandemic. It is going to be hard for everybody. But the simple fact that we're naming it from the get-go, saying like, this is it, tell me what you think, tell me what you need, and we are ready and we are committed to support you to make it work for everybody. I think that's really powerful. And that needs to be noted and elevated over and over again. So thank you for that. And I'm excited to not just have the conversation tonight, but continue having the conversation ongoing.
Thank you, Board Member Chavez. Board Member Doe, do you have anything to say?
There's not much to be said after the our Board Vice President Herrera has spoken, but I do want to extend my appreciation for the work that our staff have put in. Clearly, this is an enormous amount of work to get to where we are today and the outreach that you have to our stakeholder. I also want to thank all our stakeholders for being here today. I know that this is probably not something you want to do on a Thursday night. So thank you for being here and for putting the work in, because I know this is absolutely important to our districts and to our students. Thank you.
All right, go ahead. Oh, yeah. Board Member Patty Cotisi.
Oh, thank you, Board President Lay. I'm here just to listen tonight. I'm so grateful for the work and very moved by your presentation, Professor Marquez. So I'm just, please chime up, trying to, step up and speak and share your concerns or your praises for the work, because this is the forum to hear it.
Board Member Manuel Herrera.
It would be helpful, I believe, if staff and administration just again characterized what the data is saying to us, and then characterize what's the essence of the new practices, new framework that is being called for here. You've made other presentations, but tonight, if you could just put that at the center before we get into some dialogue here.
Ms. Marquez, before you begin, can I ask that we introduce each other? Sorry, this should have been done at the beginning. We're in community.
Yeah.
The world does not revolve around the board. So curious to know who every single person is here and on the screen as well. So
Thank you, Board Member Lorena Chavez.
Let's
Yeah,
go
we
around
should
the
start
table.
from this side of
Oops.
First of all, really glad to see a lot of people in attendance as well as panelists who have been built about this work for many years. There's people in attendance who started this work 4 or 5 years ago, and thank you for being here and helping us build these equitable communities. My name is Glenn Vanderzee. I am currently the Associate Superintendent of Human Resources, but will begin as the Acting Superintendent next week.
Awesome.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Teresa Marquez, and I'm the Associate Superintendent for Educational Services.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sean Powell. Some folks like to say Dr. Sean Powell, but I like Sean Powell. I'm the Director of Student Services, and I just want to take a moment to just really be appreciative of each and every one of you for showing up and being present in this space today, as well as to our listeners and viewers online out in the community who have made it a point to be here tonight. We see you, we appreciate you, and we thank you for participating in the conversation.
Hi, my name is Jenny Davis. I'm the principal of Piedmont Hills High School, and I'm here tonight representing the Administrative Collaborative at Eastside.
Some of the words I think get lost behind a mask. So when you speak, it'll help if you remove the mask momentarily.
Yes.
My name is Jessica Gonzalez, and I am a counselor here for Eastside.
Thank you.
My name is Abby. I am a junior at Silver Creek High School.
Thank you. Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Blasa Osuna, and I'm here tonight as a parent.
Thank you.
evening. I'm Esmeralda Murillo. I'm a school social worker at the Hill High School.
You can bring that microphone, yeah, to your place. Right, next.
Good
please.
evening. My name is Alex Villa. First and foremost, I'm a parent and I'm also assistant partner. I'm a division manager for the Santa Clara County Probation Department.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Marisa Villa. I'm a proud alumni of Eastside Union High School District, and I'm also a parent of 2 students that attend the district.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I really don't need this mic, so let me bring it back a little.
For the people online, it is needed.
Okay. My name is Roberta Cabigas. I'm alumni of Santa Teresa, was a para at one point. I'm a student advisor at James Lick, former biology teacher, and I'm here as a community member too. And I'm grateful for all of us being together to have this conversation, because this work that's here has been practiced by my colleagues for quite some time. So it's just getting a little more smoothed out. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Maria Solis, and I'm one of the student advisors at one of our sites, Evergreen Valley. I also have, I guess, wear different hats. I'm also a parent of a student within our district. And I've been in the district for quite a bit. But yeah, we, like Roberta said before, we are at the front lines of the UBR.
Thank you.
Julio Pardo, President for Classified Employees.
Thank you.
I'm Jack Hamner. I'm the president of Eastside Teachers Association.
Thank you.
Thomas Brittendahl, teacher at Oak Grove High School.
Thank you. Go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. My name is Bruce Nguyen. I'm currently a senior at Independence High School. I am the chair of the Student Governing Board. I'm also the student board member, of which I'm serving here with the board.
Thank you, Bruce.
Hi, good evening. My name is Chris Chu. I'm the Associate Superintendent for Business Services.
Thank you, Chris. All right. Oh, Brian.
Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I'm very grateful that you're willing to spend the evening with us. And I'm looking forward to hearing from each and every one of you, whether it's your concern or your praises or just your thoughts. I'm looking forward. I'm very excited. And I'm so glad that Lorraine had a great idea of letting us, all of you to introduce yourself. I'm very happy to know that so many parents and all the stakeholders are also very engaged in our process. Thank you.
Madam President, do we have any panelists who are online that could introduce themselves?
Patty, hold on, we're not done yet. Mary, can you introduce yourself?
Mary Gillen, Executive Assistant to the Board and Superintendent.
Mary is the heart of a lot of the work that we do. Thank you, Mary. I'm Lorena Chavez, one of the trustees here at Eastside.
And I'm Van Lay. I'm a board president. All right. Now, Patty, got to see. What's your question? Yeah. Everyone online, would you be able to introduce yourself?
Wendy, would you be willing to go first?
I cannot hear you.
You're muted.
Yeah.
I'm Wendy Stegman. I'm a special ed teacher at Andrew Hill, and I'm the site president for ESTA at Andrew Hill.
Thank you, Wendy.
Morgan.
Good evening. My name is Morgan Goldstein, and I'm an English teacher and site representative at Oak Grove.
Thank you.
Thank you. Michael McCoy.
How you doing? I'm Michael McCoy. I am the Associate Principal of Administrative Services at Oak Grove High School.
Thank you.
Patricia Alarcon.
Hi, I'm Patricia Alarcon, and I represent CSEA, and I also work in IT.
Thank you.
Paula Escobar.
Hi everyone, my name is Paula Escobar, and I am
the Secretary of the Eastside Union High School District Student Governing Board, and I'm really happy here to be representing the student voice and advocating for my peers and I.
Thank you.
Aaliyah Castrens
Hi, my name is Aaliyah Castrens. I'm an attending student at Evergreen Valley High School.
Thank you.
and Lucila Ortiz.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Lucila. I'm a proud alumni of James Lake High School, and I also work with Californians for Justice. We've been working for 25 years with students in the East Side.
Awesome.
And
Thank
did
you,
we miss
Lucila.
anyone?
Patty, did you
Patty
introduce
expressed
yourself?
that she's here to listen tonight.
Okay.
Oh, Patty Cortese, trustee.
All right, thank you.
We asked if we missed anyone.
Yeah, do we miss anyone? No? All right, so we will open the discussion.
Well,
on the
my
study.
request was that
Get the
our
data. Okay,
administrators
yes.
recharacterize what the data is saying, how we're interpreting it, and also, summarize the essence of the restorative approach, the approach, the practices that we want to have in place and the framework we want in place.
Thank you. So I will go ahead and take the data piece and then I'll pass it over to Dr. Powell, who will respond to the second piece of that request. So for the panelists here in person, you have in front of you the slides that are dated January 14th, 2021. And so you can refer to some of the data points that I'll review briefly within that. For our community online, these documents are also uploaded, so you are able to view them as well from your computer. And so specifically, our key performance measures around student behaviors show that when you look at behaviors as a whole, we have disproportionate outcomes when it comes specifically to our Hispanic and African American students. And what that disproportionality means is that when you look at the chart on the left-hand side, that is our cumulative enrollment. And so,
Excuse me, Ms. Marquez,
Yes.
it would help me if you took your mask off. I actually lose some of your words. Thank you.
so if you look at our cumulative enrollment, you can see that we are, let me put my glasses on here. We are about 45% Hispanic, meaning that of our total students, of about our 22,000+ students, about 45% of them are Hispanic. When you look at our Asian student population, they represent about 44% of our overall student population, and our African American students represent about 2%. However, when you look at the level of referrals, meaning the unique students that have some disciplinary action on their record, Hispanics represent almost 71% of those referrals. So again, Hispanic population is only about 45%, yet they represent 71% of the referrals that have been submitted. Our Black African American student population represents only 2% of our total student population, yet they represent 3.2% of students that have received some sort of disciplinary action. And so that's just when you look at referrals overall. When you look at what type of referrals are being submitted, close to 62% of our student referrals are for the defiance category, which is a very ambiguous, very vague, very broad category that, again, when you look at the data, is disproportionate when it comes to who is receiving those referrals for defiance. And so again, you see that when our Hispanic student population represent 45% of our total enrollment, yet they represent almost 73.4% of those defiance referrals. Our African American student population, again, represent 2% of these referrals, of the student population, yet they represent 3.3% of the referrals. And then when you look at it beyond race and ethnicity, and you look at it programmatically, we also looked at when you look at students with disabilities, our students with disabilities make up about 11% of our total enrollment, yet they have defiance referrals. They represent 24.9% of the students with defiance referrals when they only represent 11% of the total student enrollment. And then when you jump to the actual consequences of suspension, you can also see there that, again, Hispanic students represent about 45% of our student population, yet they represent 73.5% of those students that are suspended. Our African-American Black student population represents 2% of our total enrollment, yet they represent more than double that in terms of suspension. 4.4% of our suspensions are for African Black student population. There's also disproportionality when you look at it from gender. We have our male students that are disproportionately suspended. They make up about 52% of our total enrollment, yet their suspensions are at 70.4%. And then again, finally, when you look at our students with disability and you look at the suspensions, our students with disability represent 11% of our total student population, yet they represent almost 3 times that when you come to suspension. 30.3% of our students are suspended. And so that's an overview of the outcomes that we have as a system when it comes to the responses that we have for how our students respond when it comes to the referrals, defiance referrals, and suspensions.
Right, with regards to the approach we've taken to this work in regards to the UBR, really we started in grounding ourselves in education code, specifically because of our work with the Office of Civil Rights. We wanted to make sure that whatever we came up with, we would be in compliance. And so I'd like to ground us in education code 48900.5, which explicitly outlines that suspension, including supervised suspension, which means on-campus suspensions, shall only be imposed when other means of correction have failed. And that specific education code goes on to further specifically state what other means of correction means. And it calls out, one of them is using a positive behavior support approach with tiered interventions that occur during the school day and on campus. And so as we think about our work with MTSS, that specific approach aligned with the work that we were doing with MTSS. The second component in terms of other means of correction that's outlined in that same ed code as a other means of correction is the implementation of restorative justice, AKA restorative practices in school site settings. And so our decision to engage in that work is explicitly aligned with policy as well as our district's commitment. And so as a district, the district's goal is to establish and sustain healthy school climates and cultures through relationship-centered practices to keep students engaged in their learning environment. That is the commitment that we made as a district and as a board. And we've outlined 6 kind of key areas that we want to look at in relationship to that. The first one is ensuring that we have proactive, preventative, and pro-social responses. The second one is that we build relationships with students, staff, and families. The third one is that we're committed to teaching behavioral expectations for students and staff as we think about our equitable communities and areas of strength and growth are known and supported. And we reinforce positive behavior. We know that the more that we acknowledge the positive behaviors that we see, the more likely we are to continue to see those behaviors. The fifth one is that we problem solve with, and that goes back to the restorative conversation that we had in the previous board meeting around students and people tend to engage and be more cooperative with systems when we practice 3 things: explanation, expectation, clarity, and engagement. And the last one is that we elicit parent, guardian, and family support. We know that when it comes to supporting students, whether that's academically, social, emotionally, behaviorally, our parents are the biggest resource that we have, and they bring a different lens to the conversation. And so it's important to have them a part of the conversation and at the table. And that lens is actually supported within education code as well, which specifically outlines the spaces in which parents must be at the table as it relates to suspensions and addressing behavior. And so our framework, I'm gonna just refer briefly to the Uniform Behavior Response Packet here. Page 4 or 5 of that is building a behavior response system. And so as we think about MTSS, Tier 1, which is the green, is all students. So what is important for us to have in place for all students? And on the left side, you see that PBIS, or positive behavior supports, which is aligned with other means of correction. And you also see that restorative practices or restorative justice framework. As we think about Tier 1, it's important for us to explicitly teach discipline policies and procedures to students, staff, and the community at large. Because we know that the best intervention is prevention. And so that's exactly why we as a team decided that we wanted to start with the UBR in our approach to this work. But we know that we can implement positive reinforcements and we can assign consequences and interventions, but at the end of the day, we know that those don't work without relationships. None of this work, teaching and learning, doesn't happen without relationships. And so what do relationships look like? What do they mean and who defines them? Is work that requires us to do things with students. Oftentimes we may feel like we have a relationship, but I know some of the students in the room can speak to the fact that they don't always feel like they have a relationship with us. And so it's important for us to do things with them and to outline some practices about how we do that. And the restorative practices framework really allows us to leverage that and identify key and core practices that we as adults in the system can implement to create space for that to happen. And so that really is the approach that we wanted to use, was an integration of the positive behavior supports, restorative practices, so that we're aligned with the MTSS work. Because one of the things we know in education is it always feels like we're doing something new. We're not doing anything new. This work has been happening for a long time. Our advisors can speak to that. But what we're trying to do is make it clear and consistent for all groups of stakeholders so that the work is not happening in what feels like is happening in isolation. And so that really was the goal that we had with the UBR, which was about consensus building, knowing that there's so many different lenses that everyone won't get exactly what they want, but that the tool is one that engages all voices, and the highest leverage of need that they have is accounted for and explicitly named in the UBR.
And the last two pieces that I'll add, and then we obviously want to hear from our stakeholders here, is that I want to just highlight and elevate that Ed Code, which is for all of us, our laws for how we should function as a public educational institution. And Ed Code very specifically, the Ed Code that Dr. Paul has mentioned, very specifically calls for a shift in providing alternatives to suspension or expulsion. So our approach, as Dr. Paul has mentioned, is really trying to be more aligned with the education code that we are governed by as a public educational institute, which specifically is looking for us to look and research evidence-based practices to improve our behavior and academic outcomes that are age appropriate and designed to address student behavior. And then the second piece that I'll say is that our attempt with the UBR is also grounded in being able to put in place progressive discipline for our students. Just as within our own systems, I would expect that if I make a mistake as an adult, that my boss is going to begin with the verbal warning, maybe call it out to me, in hopes of me changing my behavior. And so just like within the adults in the system, we have progressive discipline as employees, we should be affording that to our students as well, that progressive discipline that allows for them to learn from their mistakes and be able to move forward to improving that behavior.
That was tremendously helpful. Maybe if it'd been a little slower, but I was able to sort of keep up. And I'm looking forward to a dialogue here tonight. There are things that probably land as reasonable or even very crucial and necessary, and there are things that may need some tweaking. I have no idea, I'm just generalizing here. And there are things that some of you may or may not have an issue with, but now is the time for some dialogue and comments.
Can I ask that maybe we go around, each one might say something in their mind, or if you want to skip, when you say you skip, so then we can return back. So in that way, everyone will have, we will listen to each one of you, then we move on to those speaker or those public comment on the on the video. So could we start? Yeah.
Can we ask if people are clear on what this is?
Mm.
Are there like any questions like
Any
at a
question?
high level? Like, do we all understand? Like, we went through data and I think maybe at a high level, but are there any questions about the actual, like what we're talking about? What are UBRs?
Anyone want to raise hand, or I didn't see anyone?
I had one concern. I'm trying to look at this from the perspective of a student or a parent, and I think I would struggle trying to follow this. I mean, and I don't know if parents really need clarification. Maybe you get it and I'm just, not seeing it right. But, if I were a parent and my student was disciplined, I don't know if I could look at this and really understand the process and the procedures of what's supposed to happen to my student when there are issues that happen in the classroom.
It seems to me like at a minimum, it would call for some more user-friendly endpoint communications or documents or whatever, something that's less the jargon of policymakers and administrators and educators, and more the language of the layperson, the parent, or what have you.
Yes, so this process and procedures, we actually did have parents and students that were a part of the process. A lot of the language in the process or in this document was driven by students. When you look at the initial current iteration of the UBR, it really had the language of ed code throughout the document. So an example of that would be that one of the options was willful use of force. Well, like, what does that mean? Or what does that look like is what we heard from our students. And so we changed it to include language like fighting, right? Like everybody in here knows what a fight is, right? We changed it to include things like intentionally refusing to follow directions after several opportunities instead of just saying defiance. And so we really attempted to capture, kind of the feedback from students and parents in terms of like, the language and ed code that was outlined in the initial UBR. And then we wanted to provide examples of what interventions and supports you might see in a classroom, because we heard from many of our novice or newer teachers that sometimes when you're in the classroom and you're in that moment, like the first thing that's coming to your mind is not like, what are all the strategies that are there? And so they wanted to be able to turn and look at their wall and say, oh, there's an option. And so we really wanted to expand that out and really make it, a progressive process that was outlined. That's not to say that we don't have supplemental versions of this document. In fact, as a team, we have 3 separate versions of this same thing because we recognize that audience matters. And that the information needs to be presented differently to different people. And so we do have 3 versions of this same kind of document available. Some of those versions are a lot more pages, right? This is intended to be a brief kind of poster, but we have, ones that are like outlined step by step, which is about 6-7 pages. There's at the classroom level and then the teacher level as well. And then the last thing I'll say is we recognize that when you do policy, it's always this big, right? And so how do you break it down and scaffold it in a way that can be received by various different people? And then the last component is we know that this work comes with professional development, training, and we are committed to making sure that that happens once the UBR is adopted. We have actually planned to provide training to every teacher across our district. In the first week of school, we have plans to actually push into classrooms. Our student advisors and our administrators have talked about pushing into classrooms to explicitly teach this. And then we also have a family engagement team here, and we actually have representatives of our family engagement team who are committed to actually putting on parent forums and workshops to explicitly teach this to our families as well, so that they can be active participants in this process.
Somebody has a question?
I want to make a comment, but whenever I'm called on.
Okay, so
On this very point.
Oh, Rurio? Okay, go ahead, Rurio.
There's two, Julio Pardo classified. There's two things I'd like to mention here. One is that most of this focuses on the classroom. So we also need to consider the fact that we do have these incidents in the office spaces also where a lot of classified work. So we need to make sure to include classified with this. But the other thing I'd like to point out is that when I look at all this is responding to negative actions by students. And the one thing that as a student myself in this district long ago, and my family was in this district, and I had a lot of friends in this district from long ago. One thing that was not present then, and I still see not present, is opportunities. And we always talk about the opportunity gap. And there's a lot of these students, part of the issue is that certain students are always picked to do certain positive things and other students aren't. And if you look at those students, you see a disproportionality there also. And so I think with this, not this group here, but I think you need to create another group to start investigating how to get more positive with students, how to try to involve the students more so that they feel more positive on the campus itself, so that they will become involved. The more involved they are with the campus, the more they see they have the opportunity to do things, the less bad behavior you will have. But when you constantly see the same groups being acclaimed, being given the chance to do things, after a while, the other groups feel like, well, you know, they don't care for us, so who cares how I act? So I think you got to somehow establish a group, a committee or something to investigate this, to find out what we can do. And this has been going on since I was a student back in the 70s. It's been going on, so that's a long time. It's time for this district to look into this and try to fix that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rogelio.
Did Patty raise her hand? Or
Oh, yeah, Patty raised her hand. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Sean, it was great to hear that you have different versions of this, and I'm wondering if there's a version that you consider like a parent-friendly version or a kind of an outward-facing version that you can share with our community. Unfortunately, I don't have a packet, so I'm not able to see what you have in front of you. I'm gonna have some things from the board docs, but.
We don't have it tonight.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't have that tonight. We wanted to bring the general one that we've been working and collaborating with, but and the one that was, you know, poster ready. I have them here, but we definitely that's the goal, to be able to support our parents, our students, our staff, and being able to really turn this into practice and really be able to engage. And so for our parents is, you know, to Jack's question, just to make sure that I explicitly respond to it. Part of it is the process that we engage in, how we communicate with our parents when something happens with their student, that there either has to be, let's say we've done the other means of corrective actions and there is a suspension. How are we communicating that? How can we point to this and say, well, you know, when, you know, Sean initially did this was a category A offense that then allowed the teacher to respond by having a restorative circle with this particular student, which then led to this. Consequently, this pattern of behavior continued. And so now we're in this space where other means of correction were not possible. And so now our only result is the suspension. So it's like a whole process that we would engage with that isn't necessarily reflected here, as Dr. Paul has mentioned. So I just want to point that piece out.
I'm just wondering if this is something that could be part of a parent handbook or something that we give parents at the beginning of the year so that they are informed ahead of time, right? Before they're not just learning about this when there's an incident or something.
Yeah, it's actually required. It's required to be included as part of our student handbook, which goes out at the start of each school year.
Great.
You have a question from, you know, from Patty?
Clarify, no, from Ms. Marquez. So what I'm hearing is, like, in essence, it's not just like giving something in writing that could feel like more understandable, but something that's like culturally responsive, where you can communicate and engage with the family with a with the parent and support them in understanding what is happening and why. What does this mean versus just like, here's your handbook. That's it. Right. Okay. Thank you.
So, otherwise, but I think Board Member Herrera, you want to speak after Julio.
Actually, it was covered by another person. So
Okay.
Patty said what I had meant to say.
All right,
about
thank you.
Seeing a different version, a parent-friendly version. So
Sure. Okay, could you go ahead, please? Then Brian, go next. No.
I'm a high school student. I'm 16.
Could you say your name again?
Oh,
please?
yeah, of course. So my name's AB. I go by he, him pronouns, just in case putting that out there. I'm 16 years old. I go to Silver Creek High School, and I see this on all of our teachers' walls, which I think it's cool finally seeing it in person and in my hand. The only really hard part about understanding this is probably because the font is so small. But I mean, skimming over it, you could clearly see at the bottom, administrative managed. It goes through the processes of what would happen if a student acted out in class and simple stuff like that. And I think give our parents a little more credit. They can understand this very simply looking at it, especially since I know our district has it printed out in the majority languages that are spoken in our district, because obviously as we see in the thing, our people that are mostly targeted are Hispanics and Latinos. So I know they have it in Spanish for our parents who only speak Spanish as well. So, I mean, looking at it, it's very clear what would be happening in here. I mean, as a student, I can understand it. So I can imagine that our parents can easily understand it as well. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you.
President, it would help if actually if this was on a larger size paper. No, I don't mean a wall thing. I mean something that you can carry and fold, but maybe twice the size of this. Yeah.
It's a good idea, Board Member Herrera. Any other one that raised hand that I did not see? Oh, okay, go ahead, please. Solis, Maria Solis.
So I've prepared a few thoughts for tonight because I feel very strongly about really continuing what you've started already, which is, creating the more equitable communities within our district. It's high stakes for me for this, right? Two of my children have graduated from Evergreen Valley, and I have one there, and if everything works well, we'll have another one coming in a few years, right? In there. So this is very important to me, very dear to my heart. One of my children is adopted from the system, right? From the foster care system. And so he came to us with quite a bit of challenges, right? And so I see this as something that can really potentially help students like my son, right? So I prepared a few thoughts and I want to share them with you. So I've been a teacher in the district. I've held several different roles within the district. And just thinking back about the teaching years, I'm thinking that really the most important thing that happens at any school site is really what happens in the classroom. That is the most single important thing that happens, right? And so having, aligning our responses like this to a more restorative practices, responses to behavior really can provide a more positive, we know that we have to provide within the classroom as many positive learning experiences as is possible, right? And so this is something that hopefully it's gonna guide us, right? Like Teresa and Sean said, not that it's going to just be something that is given, right? But it does need to be definitely supported with professional development, ongoing, right? Because we know that just like in the classroom, we need to chunk and repeat, right? Instruction. So we also know that how students manage their behavior in the classroom is another important factor in their learning and also their eventual academic success. So when students are supported within on learning how to self-regulate their emotions, how to react to conflict, how to react to negative experiences, right? They are empowered, right? And hopefully more positive outcomes can come with their learning, academically as well as social emotional learning I'm talking about. So I think there's urgency in moving towards focusing more intentionally on building connections between with the students, right? Building the connections before delivering our content. Like Teresa was saying earlier, Ms. Marquez was saying earlier, we already know our content, right? But we really do need to focus and learn how to make connections with our students, how to really truly make them feel included, welcome, just like they are, right? Because they come to us with so many different challenges and difficulties. So, and I do hope that eventually this will produce an adaptive change that will allow us to really accept all our students as they come, and where all adults positively respond to the behaviors or their needs, the social emotional needs of the students by using focusing on building relationships and community building strategies, right? By reteaching classroom expectations before going to a referral, by focusing on routines and expectations in the classroom, by having students reflect upon the agreements that they made, right, at the beginning, right, with the teacher, by possibly holding one-to-one private check-ins with the students, you know, on their behavior and helping them work through that, and possibly, right, check in and do some skill coaching, right, some really fast, on-the-go skill coaching. Hopefully, through the professional development, teachers will learn how to do those moves, right? We have instructional moves. We can also have behavior responses moves, right? So if we can work to support the students in that manner, I think we're going to go in the positive direction towards creating a more equitable community within our district. We know that an intentional focus will be necessary because we're going to need professional development to build the capacity of all the adults. Like Mr. Pardo was saying here, right? It's not just the teachers, but classified often interact quite a bit with our students, whether because they're, you know, in the part of their class is to be, you know, what they call the student assistant or whatever they call them, right? In the office or whatnot, or because they build relationships with them. So it's important that we build a capacity for everyone that that works with students on a daily basis. We also know that Eastside has the right people. We have student advisors, which is not a position that is that you can find in a lot of other districts, right? Student advisors can support this work. I think that's, to me, I look forward to doing that, right? This is where I want to live. This is where I want to work a lot of the times, right? I think for most of us, we have an innate desire to be in harmony with others. And so, you know, that's where I want to live. So that's all I want to say, I guess. But I know that both student behavior, both the classroom managed and the administrative managed behaviors are really essentially in nature in restorative practices, right? So we know that that's the aim. So I invite everybody to really think through this and really focus on the purpose rather than you know, nitpick the format or, you know, how we're going to deliver it, because that's really not as important as the essence of what this is, the purpose of it is. So thank you.
Madam President, we have a comment here inside, and then perhaps after Wendy Stegman as a panelist online.
Good evening, Alex Villa. Forgive me, I'm in between roles because I'm a professional system partner working with the probation department, as well as a current parent of a current student. So I'm kind of bouncing between. And just this evening, before coming here, I was on a meeting with our Youth Advisory Council through the probation department. And as a parent, I'm kind of taking note that it was 7:17 before we heard our first student voice. And I do think that we want to honor our students when they're in these spaces, whether virtually or in person. And so I just want to say, when we're doing this work, it matters. It really does matter how much you're opening the floor to these students and letting them have an opportunity to feel respected in the space. That's me as a parent and somewhat as a professional. As a professional, I'd like to say that I was on the original Stakeholder Equity Committee. I played a part in the framework that you see before you. We went through copious amounts of data. We went through painful sessions of discussion and debate, and we came up with a tool that we knew was going to be quite challenging to implement, but we knew the tool was good. We didn't say it was perfect. We knew it was really good and that it would probably take some evolution over the course of time. And here we are. We have a good tool that needs to be implemented. And I think that's what I'm hearing is before this body. And I did present to this body the initial framework that we're looking at today, the initial one. But from a professional standpoint, I'd just like to speak a little bit about how my work in the probation department fits into this development of this tool. You know, the probation department serves juvenile justice involved youth. Many are in all these different schools, throughout the county. And when I think of the work of the probation department, I actually oversee the education services unit. I oversee our dually involved youth unit, and I also oversee our prevention and early intervention unit. So I have a continuum that I work within. And so when we talk about how we are evolving our department and our processes and our policies and actually our culture more than anything, first we had to understand a couple of things. One, adolescent brain development. What is it? What does it mean? What is happening? And what is going on in the adolescent brain that leads them to do many of the reckless, not thought out things that they do? And I'll just be honest. Adolescent brain development concludes around the age 24. I'll be honest, when I was 24, that's when the light turned on for me. So I think my brain stopped developing at that point and I began to really make progress, right? So we talked about adolescent brain development. The other thing was having a trauma-informed lens, understanding what happens in these people's lives, not what they're doing, but what's happening with them. And that's a fundamental paradigm shift in the way that you approach the work. When I see you and I'm asking you, or I'm asking myself rather, what's happening with you, I'm going to approach you quite differently than me asking what's wrong with you. What's wrong with you places blame, criticism, critique on the person across the table or across the room or whatever. And so utilizing a trauma-informed approach is pivotal to shifting paradigms. And then the last element that I just kind of wanted to mention really quick was the idea of, I'll paraphrase Judge Lucero, who's one of our juvenile justice judges, school being the pro-social activity that we can all agree we want these young people in. And so, I mean, let's be frank, I don't want them in my system. I'd rather have them in other systems that are supportive, that are educational, that are going to help them grow and mature outside of a justice system. And so we work very hard within the probation department through prevention and early intervention to provide the opportunities that some of you have mentioned tonight. Opportunities to maybe only get a letter and to just go about your way if that's appropriate. And then we have the continuum that's available to us if it's necessary and if it's appropriate. But even if we get to all that, it's still through the lens of a trauma-informed lens, a adolescent brain development lens, trying to gain some opportunities for growth and maturation, and really trying to be supportive. And so I think that the last point that I'd like to make from my standpoint as a professional is the reflective nature of the work that we do today. today more than ever, I believe, and I've been in the probation department for about 20 years, I believe that we are more self-reflective as an organization than we have ever been. And so I challenge you to reflect internally about what it is that you're looking at. The data, I'm just going to agree with Ms. Marquez. It's not that different from the couple years ago when we first looked at it. That's concerning. Why is that? And so I do think it's easy for the system, whatever system you operate in, to look at itself and say, oh, it's the students, it's the parents, they can't understand this chart, whatever the circumstance may be. At the end of the day, what are we, the professionals who are getting paid to be in the room with these young people every day, what are we doing to look at ourselves about what we bring to the table, and how are we going to change our approach to help to provide opportunities, to change the culture, to provide some care and compassion and dignity and equity to the work that we all do in the different places that we're in. And so I'll kind of just leave it there, but the last part actually is really about the equity piece. You know, we're doing a lot of work in the probation department right now through the Governmental Alliance on Race Equity. And really, that's what the heart of this work was to create some equity in these responses. And so when you look at the different statistics related to the disproportionality, we haven't done much growth there. And so I just want to kind of put a few of those thoughts out there. I appreciate the opportunity. I definitely appreciate the students and all of our partners that are in the room. Thank you.
That was powerful for me. Wow.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. The next public comment is from Wendy Stegman, please.
Hi, I'm impressed with the people who have spoken, and indeed, in my 30 or so years of teaching, we do indeed teach every child separately. Every child is an individual and has individual needs. And trauma-informed has been a part of my life. I've had about 300 foster kids, teenagers, over the last 45 plus years that I've been taking kids. So that is my approach every day. However, there's one thing we need to think about. And if we only had one child in a class, each one of us would do incredible, wonderful things with one child. But when you have a class with 18 kids, or with 30 or 32 or 42 or 45 kids, when one child is acting out, it can be very difficult to give that child what they need in that time, when the other children also are there for education, for social, for all of these other needs. And sometimes we have to, one of the things that is so good about having advisors is when you can tell a kid needs more and you can't do it there, you can't do it in front of the rest of the class. You can't stop their progress and momentum in that time. Then being able to call an advisor and say, take a few minutes, please. And sometimes they can do it, they can get it turned around, they can find out what's wrong. But it really is a difficult situation. I would love to have every single kid get wonderful restorative treatment every single day. But there are other kids in the class. And I think we have to look at the reality of that as well. When you're writing a plan I write special ed plans, and I can write a plan for one child. And at some point I'll see a general ed teacher going, oh my goodness, because now 30 people have written IEPs that say the child has to have preferential seating in the front row. Well, you run out of front row at some point. And so I just want us to also understand the realities of the classroom every one of us gets up in the morning and believes this is a new day and it's going to be great. And we can do wonderful things for this kid. Every child in the room is going to learn, every kid is going to grow. And some aren't going to be in that place. And you're going to have a spectrum in the class of where kids are and what they're ready for. And I don't want to lose sight of some of the reality. I'm not a naysayer. I'm not saying this is silly, we're not doing this. Of course, we're headed this direction. And this has been in effect in a lot of people's classrooms already. But we also have to honor ed code and understand that there are some times when you discuss expectations and you discuss and it goes too far. I'm dealing with another teacher who's just contacted me about being threatened by a child today. And she's concerned for her own health. We've got to look at the reality while we look at all the wonderful possibilities. And somehow we've got to figure out ways to make them work together. And I think everybody would like more PD on this. Everybody wants to be, unfortunately, restorative justice came to our campuses often with no training, no buy-in, no input, no nothing from the teachers and the CSEA people who were expected to make those things work. So we need to start at the ground level. We need to get people trained. We need to have people comfortable. We need to have people using a common language. And that will help us deal with each other and to explain things to children. And if they hear the same word in each class for the same behavior, that's helpful. All right, I'll leave it there, but I like the chart with some exceptions. I'm not sure about the one where it says teachers are supposed to keep kids in at lunch. Many of us do anyway, but it is still people's lunch and you have to, unfortunately, not all teachers are hermetically sealed and some have to go to the bathroom during the day. So, just little pieces of reality that you need to get from the people who are in the classrooms, in the offices, to go with the wonderful overview umbrella that's being provided. Thank you.
Thank you,
Question on
Wendy.
that. I wanna
Yeah,
Wendy Stegman, you mentioned we need to find ways to make them work together, and I lost what the them was. Find ways to make them work together. What do you remember saying that and what you meant?
I believe that was find ways to make the different methods work together, the different, yes, we need discipline, but yes, we need kindness, and to make it all work.
Okay.
I believe.
Thank you.
If I may, help me but I understand the way I understand is you essentially saying we'll reconcile the aspirations with the practical reality in the classroom. I think
right.
That's what you're referring to, Wendy.
I want to invite a student, as Paula Escobar has been raised a hand. Go ahead, Paula.
Hello, everyone. So I really just want to emphasize the need for student voice at the forefront of this discussion. Also, the need for restorative practices that are fully implemented and fully developed, that ones that we keep following up on, and initiatives that we have proper training for in terms of making sure that all staff, all students, and everyone involved in our school communities are on board with. And I think that this takes in a lot of different intersections of issues that we see on our campus. For example, when we think of how we're going to help our students, we need to actually talk to our students of color, our foster students, our students with special needs. We really need to have their needs at the forefront and be able to communicate with them and see what their opinions are and what they need to be supported. And I think it's just a really big difference. Like, I know, like, I went to this webinar once and someone said there's a really big difference when someone says, I'm watching you versus I see you, I hear you, and I'm going to give you the support that you need and we can work on it together. And with that, I think that we have a lot of work to do. And this is not just like a one-time thing where we're going to recreate this one kind of paper and it's going to solve everything. It's something we're going to have to keep having discussions on. And in order to do this, I know we have recently took off SROs off our campuses. We also implemented the ethnic studies curriculum. And I think that these are great ways to pave those pathways for healing for our students. And I think it's a great starting point, but we have a lot of work to do. And I think for our district, that means reimagining what we mean when we say consequences / punishment for students. I think it means also evaluating how we treat students with, and also reevaluating how we as a community function and respond to our students. And with this framework of restorative justice is where we can also invest in what they call community schools, where we have more counselors, we have more social workers, we have more community outreach specialists that are directly working with parents and other community members so students could have other gateways for opportunity and resources, where our wellness and our pathways for college readiness are prioritized, and we know of our options outside of high school, and that we're prepared for both our school needs, like whether that means tutoring, but also after high school, whether that means having access to things such as technical school, community college. There's just so many different resources that need to be implemented. And I believe that when we're looking also like specifically about responding to punishments, it's seeing that suspension really isn't the answer a lot of the times. Suspending a student for something as small as absenteeism or a bunch of tardies is not going to help the situation at all, especially when students of color tend to be the most impacted by these practices. In order to aid to this, we need to really implement volunteer and community-based models in our schools, and also equip our staff so that they know how to respond to students properly and have just a kind of standard for how our students will be treated across all of our schools in the district. And I think, again, with that, we need to have more spaces for students to have their input. I think the fact that some students might not even know that we're having this discussion and they're the ones who are the most impacted by this. I think we need to really focus on what we're trying to do here and see, like, make really feasible goals for ourselves so that we'll be able to reach them. And also something else is that, like, restorative justice isn't one policy, it's a whole entire framework where we're going to have to really work towards. And I know it's possible, I know we can do it, but we really need to put up the work. And I know, as other people have said, that like I haven't been in as a student for that long, but since we started having these discussions, we honestly haven't really seen that many changes in just the disparities that we see impacting our Black, Hispanic, Native American students of color. In order to really actually make progress with this, we need to have more discussions and more action items. We need to have more of these forums that specifically touch on student issues and really address the racism that is still haunting our schools across every campus. And once again, I know we could do it together, but I think that the discussion is really just a starting point, and it really is just seeing how we could support and uplift our students instead of locking them up and having to expel or suspend them.
Well, excellent, Paula, for your comments. I think I saw earlier, I saw Michael McCoy raise hand, but I didn't see anymore. So I'm going to ask Morgan Constant, please.
Yes. Oh, I'm still willing to speak if I have the availability to do so.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry. I just wanted to make a few comments that I've heard a lot of good things in today's meeting, and I just want to highlight a few points that I've heard. Most important is that teachers are no longer just content teachers. They are teachers of the whole student, and the holistic approach has to be taken for these manners to be across the board. MTSS Tier 1, kind of a service for everyone. With that being said, relationship building with students is the most important. And I can speak directly to these benefits of positive relationship building, and maybe having some district-wide training or school-wide training on how to build relationships with students who maybe do not look like you, whose students maybe do not grow up like you live, and you live in a completely different neighborhood. Because I have served as an advisor and now as a social principal of administrative services, and seeing both sides of the spectrum, to where the teachers who build the relationships and build the respect with the students do not have the outbursts. When the UBR first came out and we did a school-wide training, and we had these discussions, and as our responses became uniform, the behaviors decreased, because now the students who were once being kicked out of class for the first offense or second offense were now having these additional discussions, in which us advisors and our associate principal at the time were saying, teacher, did you speak with the student? Did you try an intervention of, pulling them to the side? Did you try building a relationship and just asking them, how are you doing today? Because that simple question would really help repair the relationship. Because when they came into the office as advisors, they were expressing their emotions, their raw emotions. And the most important thing was, my teacher doesn't know what's going on with me. They just completely, when I walked in, I felt judged as a Latino ex-student, as an African-American. And this teacher does not understand where I'm coming from, because I see them getting into their BMW and going back to Los Gatos, where I know they live. So how can they relate to me when they already see me as a thug, or they see me as a product of my environment, not knowing that the cargo sweats and white t-shirt is 4 for $20 at the Jeans Plus down the street from Oak Grove, and that's all their family can afford, but they're being judged very hard. So most important is relationship building with the students. And once you build the relationships, students will work for you and give you the pass. Additionally, with the current UBR, it is much clearer and explicit for parents to have, because I did reference the chart, and I would most frequently trying to explain, along with my counterpart, Ms. Holtz, who was AP at the time, or the advisor at the time, and Ms. Aragon, who was assistant principal when I first started, that we had the trainings and we revisited and we retaught our teaching staff as well. No, you're going to go back in here because the problem is not with us. When we get them in our offices, we can communicate and have positive relationships. And part of that was us building relationships with the students, even our ELKs, our extra love kids. When we built those relationships, and then we had to have those tough conversations to maybe have a detention or a community service or even a suspension, they understood that we were coming from a place of positivity and not from a place of maybe implicit bias or prejudice. And so the UBR was instrumental in reducing our referrals, because the students felt it was becoming fair across each classroom, whether it was the science classroom or the language arts, or the mathematics classrooms, or on the PE. And additionally, our SOAR, which is kind of explicit with the behaviors that we want to see our kids, we were reinforcing our kids with our talent tickets to have it that everyone can have an opportunity to be recognized and get caught doing something positive instead of getting caught doing something negative. So most importantly, the UBR does make it equitable, because it allows you to, maybe one student just needs the one check-in. Maybe the student may need 3 check-ins before they get sent to the advisor or get sent to the office. And that's what when we talk about equitable approaches to students, that's what we talk about. It's not equality where everyone gets the same treatment, because we all know that that is not the case. So this new UBR explicitly states these interventions and the next steps, but in it also, it helps the student understand that the teacher is just not trying to send them out of class the first instance that there's an issue, that the teacher is trying to work with them and maybe repair this relationship or build this relationship with that student to show that they care and they're trying to get to the deeper issue, because that student is acting out not due to the teacher, but due to outside sources. And so when that student feels respected and cared for, those students will go above and beyond. And I can speak to that because I have sat in an expulsion hearing where the parent thanked me while we are on trial for putting their kid up for expulsion. And that spoke volumes, because we tried everything. We were in communication. We knew we had attempted to show the love and care and want that student to belong at our school, but that student still made poor choices. And the parent thanked us in the room, which was amazing to me, which means that we can still do our jobs and have the consequences, but also still keep positive relationships with our students and families. So I just want to say that this UBR is much more explicit when it comes to user-friendly with the parents, the community. I do appreciate all of the tireless work that has gone behind the scenes to get this thing implemented. And I do appreciate the student voices, because the Oak Grove staff can vouch for me, but I'm all about getting more student voice, because the more they're engaged, the more positive the school climate and environment is at Oak Grove and all campus on the east side. So I thank you for your time tonight, and I appreciate the hard work and discussions that we're having to get our district in a much better place than we already are. And we're already in a great place and having these discussions, which is great as well. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Michael.
I'd like to just make a couple of clarifications before the next comment, just because we have so many different voices and stakeholders in the room. There's a couple of things that Mr. McCoy pointed out that I just want to give context to, and I'm going to reference page 5 of the Building the Behavior Response. So one of the things that Mr. McCoy spoke to was in context of building a behavior response, the UBR doesn't work in isolation. And so one of the things that he referenced was Oak Grove SOAR. And SOAR is actually a reference to how they teach expectations at their school. SOAR is actually an acronym. It stands for social contributors. The O stands for outstanding communicators. The A stands for academic achievers, and the R stands for respectful citizens. And they use that to define what positive behavior looks like on Oak Grove campus. And they explicitly teach that as well as the UBR to students. Mr. McCoy also spoke to what they call talent tickets, and talent tickets at Oak Grove refer to the tier 1 positive behavior interventions and response on this graph, to the positive feedback and acknowledgement that you see listed there. At Oak Grove, they use talent tickets to acknowledge positive student behavior on their campus, and those talent tickets can then be used to trade in for different rewards and acknowledgements throughout their school site. And so as we talk about this, it's important to understand that this UBR is one component of a large system that is intended to help support, acknowledge, build relationships for students. And the UBR, again, is one component of that. But I think Mr. McCoy did a really great job of really bringing together tier 1 as a whole, which is not just about responding to behaviors. It's about preventing behaviors by teaching expectations, by teaching what happens when you make poor decisions before you make the decision, so that you know what the outcome might be. And it's also about acknowledging the behaviors and the positive behaviors that we see, as well as growth in behaviors that we see from students. So maybe you missed all 7 periods last week, and today you only missed 2 periods. What's up, y'all? Like, I'm so glad that you missed 2 periods this week, because if we do that, the next week, they'll only miss 1 period. And the week after that, it might be 0 periods. And so that really is the approach that we're looking for. And I just wanted to acknowledge Mr. McCoy for really outlining that tier 1, and also make sure that everyone in the room was able to connect what he was saying back to this entire spectrum of building a behavior response system.
Thank you, Dr. Powell. I think.
Over there, you had.
Okay. Let me invite a student over there before I invite Morgan. Thank you.
I just wanted to say that I'm really glad that I had the opportunity to speak to you all and to hear everybody's voices and their concerns and also ideas. Since graduating from Mount Pleasant High School here in the district, I have been a bilingual elementary school teacher, a stay-at-home parent, an ally advocate for high school students, and a substitute teacher. And one of the most challenging jobs I've had is being the parent in our district. I was so looking forward to our child, or both of our girls, having an excellent experience. We have so much pride in our high school. I mean, I meet students from my high school all over the place, and we all have a lot of pride. We continue to have it. And I really wanted my daughters to be able to take away what I took from my high school experience. And that was that connection with teachers, the staff, having those wonderful memories, feeling a sense of community and a sense of family, and having people that they felt they could trust. That if I wasn't there, their father wasn't there, that they had someone on that campus that they knew was their go-to, was their cheerleader, was their supporter, was going to be there for them, not just as a teacher, but someone to listen and really care about whatever they had going on at that moment. They've had some great teachers. They have been super involved in school. We've never had an issue with behavior, but I have had to go to the school on multiple occasions, not because of their behavior, but because of things that have happened. Part of that has been what I am taking, what I believe has been also looking at them as a person of color. And it's been frustrating, it's been hurtful, it's been angering at times, and it's created a lot of conversations that I'm sure we'll have to continue having, unfortunately, because of the society that we live in. We're talking about things evolving and progressing and looking at this as something new, but I also think some of this stuff is going back to basics. So, you know, growing up here in San Jose, we had teachers where we built a sense of community, we built a sense of trust and a sense of communication. And we also had the fields many times when we had people that we could trust, that if we had a consequence, if we were talking too much, we didn't turn in an assignment, that it really wasn't coming from a wrong place, but versus a place of love and trying to support and trying to teach. And I think some of our students, especially during this time of this pandemic, have felt very disengaged. I think that there's a lot going on. There's a lot of going on for students that they themselves know about each other's lives and maybe don't share with us because they're trying to keep that trust and that loyalty with their friends. But it has been expressed that a lot of students are really dealing with challenges, mental health challenges, depression, grief. They're scared and they don't know what's going to happen next. If we as adults feel like that, I can only imagine what they're feeling. I personally have sent 2 emails. We have sent 2 emails regarding this and these concerns, and they've come back with nothing. There has not even been a response to it. That to me is scary, that a parent would mention this to the staff and that there's not a response. And it leads me to feel like if a student's bringing this to the staff, what is the response? Students are doing their best to look out for one another. And I think we need to give them that voice and that attention. And which leads me back to this right here. The language that's used in this could help students relay their messages to the staff. It gives them examples, it gives them vocabulary to use. So I don't think that this is all as far as, you know, just when they're in trouble, but also when they need something, when they want to communicate something, when they want to say what's on their mind. They can refer to this and use it to help them put what they feel into words. The other thing is, I think that as adults during this last, I say 1.5 years because our students often look at their year by the school year, right? So they say we've been out for 1.5 years. We gotta give them a little bit of leeway sometimes. I've heard them talk in conversation about things that are happening in their teachers' lives, challenges that are happening in their teachers' lives, grief they're experiencing, you know, different things that they've experienced over this last 1.5 years of school. But are we extending them that same thing in return? Because they often talk amongst each other, oh, we're concerned about this teacher, I heard about this, and I hope so-and-so is okay. I just hope that the same thing is given to them in return. And if we can go back to those basics of community trust and communication, I think that we can really salvage some relationships. I think that there's students who don't want to be back on campus. There's some students that don't even want to attend their graduation at this point. And it may be a little late for them right now, but you have students coming back in the fall. And I really hope that you'll take these things into consideration, because even the toughest students that I've worked with, the ones that get in trouble, the ones that might give a little more attitude, are often the ones that are hurting the most. And they're often the most sensitive, and they're most in tune to what's going on with everybody else in the classroom. So I hope that you'll consider that when you're talking to that person who might be in trouble and displaying behaviors that are not conducive to what you see to learning, and really look at them as a human being and look at maybe what's behind all of that. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Now, Morgan Golston.
Yes, thank you. So I am a classroom teacher. I teach English, and I'm hearing so much about the importance of providing training and providing support for students and meeting students where they are. And I fully agree with this. During this meeting, I received an email from a student saying, Ms. Goldstein, I cannot do my presentation tomorrow. I'm not going to do it. I'm too scared to talk in front of the class. And my response is, okay, can you just do it one-on-one with me? I don't want you to miss this opportunity. I will meet you where you are. And I just want to express a hope that when we are training our teachers, we are extending that same philosophy to them. I know with the implicit bias training we had a few years back, I had colleagues who, they've been doing this learning and they've been doing this reading for years, and frankly, they saw the value in the training, but they were bored. They knew the theory. They were ready to talk about action. And I had colleagues who this was brand new to them. And they were like, a micro what? What do you mean saying someone's hair looks springy is not okay? And so we need to find a way to differentiate our training for teachers, just as we differentiate our instruction for our students. So I hope that with this implementation, we will be carrying that philosophy throughout. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Good evening, everyone. I would really like the advocacy that everyone has here, and I'm a full believer everyone here and online is an advocate, period, for students. I think that's a separate meeting, because we really are talking about a behavior response system. When things don't go well, what are we going to do? When we play Monopoly or any game, we want to know the rules, because we don't want them to be changed. And that's what this is about. What are the rules? But I do hope that we use, you were on this team 5 years ago, Mr. Villa, and some of us have been on the advisor team for 10 plus years trying to get this sorted out. And we've had student voices. So I'm really proud of the work that the district has facilitated. And being at this final point, I really hope that we could look at a couple of things. This blue boxes are opportunities, right, for teachers to remediate. That blue box, it doesn't mean, and Ms. Stegman, you brought up a beautiful point of, does the teacher have to stay at break or lunch? No, it's an opportunity or an option. And I think that really has to be clear for teachers to understand, and our union leadership to understand it's an opportunity. It's not forcing anyone. I really do also like the classified staff, the union leadership bringing up the campus, because things happen on campus. There's a blacktop, there's a football field, there's a parking lot, there are hallways, there are bathrooms, there are football games, there are games. Every facility has little nooks and crannies, and we need to understand that these rules apply. That's the game, right? Our school sites are where we're living. We're teaching adults, we're teaching young adults to be full-fledged adults. And they're gonna have to code switch with those rules. And we're trying to get on the same page here and I really wanna come back to this. This is the most powerful statement I think that the district has made, is it's a behavior response system. And this is a piece of that system. As a student advisor, I'm a piece of that system. Parents are a piece of that system. Students owning their behavior and processing that is a part of this response. And all the beautiful opportunities and changes we want in education are also a part of that response. I do like that we have these areas of growth at the top, right? Very clearly in the dark blue where the arrow is, that Dr. Sean pointed out, those 6 things are really important to go ahead and understand. Those are our foundations. And I want us to keep coming back to this uniform. This is a behavior response system. And I don't want to belabor the points, but Mr. McCoy made a wonderful point at SOAR at Oak Grove. Every school has or will have a catch-all phrase, At James Lick, we're developing, and we've always had, trust, respect, responsibility. And now we're defining those behaviors. We're showing what those look like in the classroom, in the hallway, with your peers, when you're upset. Every single one of us here, when we're upset, we are at our worst. And this beautiful document that still needs to be tweaked, of course, is when we see kids at their worst, parents at their worst. We love our babies. Even if you don't have no babies, you love your cousins, your nephew, whatever, your neighbors. This is when we're at our worst, and it's going to keep us as adults steady. It's going to keep the community steady, and it's giving the rules. That's what we're looking at, giving a fair playing field, no matter what you look like, no matter who you are, campus to campus, parent to parent, community to community. I went to Santa Teresa. I work at James Lake. I love James Lake. Very different communities, right? We want an equal playing field. We're talking equity. And I think that we're getting this work done. I did also just want to make a few comments about as a former science teacher and having a fire over here, and a fire with permission. I like to use fire in my science class. You can't have a lab science without a lab science, but also dealing with a panic attack, and dealing with a stranger, and dealing with a phone and an email, and my family texting me, we need your help. All of those things teachers deal with at once. At once. Students in the room, you've seen your teachers. Everyone in this room has seen their teachers manage many things. And this is to help ground that teacher with those emergencies. Yeah, it's to help ground that administrator who's busy, that secretary who also needs to support with a classified staff, so they know, because they should also know, because they're on campus every day. I'd also like to talk about the great work the district has done with implicit bias. When I had that training a few years ago, I was just like, thank you. This is finally happening, because we all are biased, no matter what you say. And the district has said full-fledged, and so have students, and so have teachers, and so have every advocate in the country has said, when are we going to look at this? And we have, but we need to come back to that. I want my name on a sheet checked off implicit bias, and I want all my peers' names checked off on a list that they did this training. Because I want the same person that greets my mixed race son every day to have that implicit bias, period. I want my neighbors' kids to have that. I want my whole community. I want the whole country. I want the whole world to have that. But we're still in Eastside. We'll stop here. The trauma-informed practices that Mr. Villa was talking about. There are 4 of us currently trained to deliver the trauma-informed practices training at the district. I am one of those people. And I look forward to delivering that to our staff. We've only been able to deliver a little tiny piece because of the pandemic, but it is on the docs to do. Data, data, wherever you're at. It has not changed in a few years because we're still trying to get the rules to everyone the same. And I'm hopeful and very confident that the data will change with us getting on the same page with one tool. I'd also like to bring up student voice. That's the only reason we're all here. You guys are amazing, and students before have put in work in this for many moons. Graduates and adults on their own now have sat where you guys have sat, and other panels, and I feel like there's been a really good opportunity for them to use their voice here. And going back to other trainings is restorative practices. We really need to debrief that. And we need a commitment from the board and the district for those trainings to continue to happen and to come back to them, right? The new teachers come fully loaded. They're like a brand new car. They have all these things. Some of us a little older, we need a little more. And But no matter what, even the teachers who come fully loaded, they still need a reminder, because in that emergency, in your worst point, after a car accident, you're not good. And sometimes some of this behavior is that way. If you could go ahead and just look at the bottom piece where it says administrative managed majors. These are both very light and very serious. If you look at that first box, that's all the kind of stuff we're talking about, right? But then you get to threats to committed violence in administrative managed, right? Then you get into a response, right? And you get to these different responses that allows us as educators to be proactive and positive and help a student learn. Miss Edison, who was years ago here, she called kids jello brains because pieces are together and the rest is like shaky, and we're trying to get you to slow down. And I really like that, because you're right, their brains are developing. We are dealing with developing young people, and until we continue to come back to that in the conversation, we're really missing the point. We were all young once. We were not all perfect. I know your mothers would not agree. You were perfect, but we do need even playing field for everyone, and this is the road to that. I really want to bring you to the scariest box for me, to the right, which is the light yellow. That's to the right. Yeah. And though I am not an administrator, I am student advisors in this room and student advisors at home. We are the first responders for everything here. I want you to clearly hear that. Student advisors are the first responders to everything here, but in addition to the teacher. I want to go home every day. When you look at that light yellow box, I know my peers do, and I know parents do, and in light of what happened yesterday, we have to continue this conversation, and it has to be respectful. It has to be equitable, and we have to review it regularly. So I hope when the board decides on June 3rd to vote for this or not, or whatever amends you'd like to make, that maybe we make this an annual thing, a biannual thing, because this is a living document, and it is to keep everyone safe. I'd love to come and chat with you guys one day. Let's have lunch. I want to be able to grow old here and improve my practice. And I know all my colleagues do too. So I beg of you, right? For everyone as parent, I'm a parent, I want my baby home every day too. Let's look at these and know that you have a lot of caring people on campuses. None of us got into teaching. None of us do what we do just because we love our students, we love our colleagues, we love our schools. I'm sure any one of you could walk to your car and find some James Lick or Silver Creek High School or whatever gear you have in your car, you have something in your car that you wear to a game, Eastside. This is a group of caring individuals. My son comes to this district. My cousins went to this district. My family's work for this district. I believe we're on the right track. And I believe with your good leadership, we're going to continue that. So I thank you for your time, everyone.
Can you say your name, please?
My name is Roberta Cabigas.
Roberta what?
Cabigas.
Cabigas, okay.
Cabigas.
And I want to ask Mary if you could provide us a list later of everyone who's attended here tonight and their contact info too.
Thank
Appreciate
you. I saw the student raise hand is Alia Gastrans, right? Go ahead, please. Yes.
Hi all, my name is Aaliyah Castrans. As I mentioned, I am a student here at Evergreen, and I wanted to first say that I appreciate all of the value in student voice tonight, and I wanted to thank my fellow peer Paula for encouraging us to make this an open space for our students. And I did make a brief public comment about this topic about restorative justice in a previous meeting. And I just really wanted to re-emphasize the disproportionality in punishments against Latinx students and students of color, and really highlight that we need to continue, like the speaker before me had mentioned, that we need to continue to make it a priority to proactively remove racial bias and promote anti-racist training for disciplinary actions. And for me personally, witnessing firsthand two of my best friends leave my school, whether it was two situations, one either feeling targeted by teachers on the basis of race, or two, having an experience where other students who weren't particularly of color did not receive any serious consequences for attacking him with racial slurs and hate. And I think that like everyone on this panel has said, that we need to see students as individuals, but that also has to be positive and not in a way that feels like you are harassing them or in a way that they feel, again, targeted on the basis of race. And I'm glad that other participants have been reestablishing this aspect back into the conversation. And it really is disheartening to hear from parents that that their students have, their children have experienced this. But it just all goes to show that this is beyond crucial and important to implement restorative justice, and that building that sense of relationship and community does so much and can even have an effect on keeping kids in your school, which is so, it's just, it's so amazing, not even amazing to me, it's just so unbelievable to me that, you know, there are students of color leaving my school because they feel targeted. And I just wanted to put that out there and really give my story about what happened to my friends, and just like everyone here wanted to value student voice, I wanted to share that with you all and share that aspect of restorative justice in our schools.
Thank you. I think I saw Francine Estranero raise the hand. Please go ahead, Francine.
Hi, my name is Francine Estranero, and I am a senior at James Lick High School. And I was going over the UBR that was in the shown to all of us. And I was trying to see if there was something that centered around what happens on social media and if that is covered by what the UBR dictates. Because especially over the last couple of years, with social media becoming more and more prominent in society, I was just wondering if sort of like if there was a way that the UBR was able to also cover what happens on social media, because there are things that happen on social media that most definitely fall under these categories. But because there's a gray area with how social media is run and how it impacts students and how schools are able to find out about it, I was just wanting to put it on everyone's radar that if this is not something already addressed by the UBR in a place that I can't find, to keep it prominent when you consider when students talk about things that happen off campus or on social media, because there are many things that happen on social media that are behaviors that are addressed directly here on the UBR. That's just all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I'd actually like to just chime in, and we absolutely concur with that, and we completely understand social media is a gray area, but it is one that when social media impacts what's happening on school sites, we do have the jurisdiction to intervene. And if you look at the UBR in that red section, there's two columns in that first box. The one on the right, 3 up from the bottom, actually says bullying, and we explicitly called out including social media or other electronic means, because we heard from you, the students, just how important and impactful that has been on school sites. And so it is there, and we call it out because we know that, and especially, you know, during distance learning, I think our advisors, myself, as folks who deal with behavior can say, I think social media was probably one of the top 3 things that we had to, you know, address during distance learning. And so it's definitely there, and we definitely are here to support and address that. And we do that at the administrative level from the beginning, because it's just so complex that we feel like it requires a higher level of support.
Thank you, Dr. Power. I think I saw Escobar Paula raise the hand. Go ahead, Paula.
Hi, everyone, again. Yeah, I want to first thank my fellow peers, Aaliyah and Francine, for just coming up here today and really showing and representing us students. And also any other students who are in the attendees list. And I really wanted to emphasize how, as a part of like responding to these behaviors, we really need to, as a school district, build pathways for healing for our students of color and anyone who is like falling victim to discrimination in any form. And by that, I mean making sure that if, let's say someone is like, if a teacher or a peer is acting in a discriminant manner to another student, then the student who is being impacted will receive support services by the school and be connected with either a counselor or school administrator so that they can have their perspective heard and that they could get some sort of support, because these events, as Aaliyah mentioned, are really traumatizing and they could really lead to students of color leaving an entire campus because they feel they're not welcomed and they feel that their voices are just being brushed off. And in order to address this, I think that also means accountability for making sure that our students are able to unlearn these like discriminatory tendencies such as homophobia and racism. And I think that hopefully like, our ethnic studies will be able to remedy that in the upcoming years. But I believe that the UBR should include something along those lines. And also, as Francine mentioned, something with responding to social media. I'm glad that that was added because that is just really important as we see just like the high presence of social media and how so many of our students use it. And so I really think that should be held accountable as well. In addition to that, I think addressing sexual assault is also something that the district needs to look into in order to respond to it properly, because we see that a lot of students come forward with their stories of being sexually harassed by another student, and that could really, once again, is really detrimental to their mental health and their well-being. In order to address that, I believe that beyond the UBR, there needs to be initiatives and protocols established in order to best support victims and survivors.
Thank you, Paula. Go ahead on this side. Thomas. Okay, go ahead first, then Tom will be next.
Please, it helps to always
Sure.
hear the name before everyone speaks.
Okay. My name is AB. Again, I go to Silver Creek High School. I'm a junior right now, and I fully agree with what my peers are saying about racial inequality and homophobia on campuses. But I just thought I'd show a way that reformative practice has worked for me at school. At the beginning of our online school year this year, I was going to my PE class, and I actually, on the first day, was kicked out. I was in class suspended because of a simple miscommunication between me and my teacher. If he thought I was breaking the rules, even though I was just really confused about what was happening, because technology, man. I mean, I know I'm a youth, but I don't get it that well. And so I spoke to my mom about it. I spoke to my parents about it, and I was just really angry that I wasn't given benefit of the doubt. I was just right away like, oh, you're causing trouble, get out of here. And so even though it wasn't my teacher that reached out to me, I reached out to my teacher and was like, I think we got off on the wrong foot. This is how I feel about what just happened. And I did feel personally targeted for something that wasn't even my fault. It was just not clarified well. And he took it and he was right away very sorry about what happened and sorry about the way he made me feel. And we had a good conversation, a healthy conversation. Well, email, because I'm not that good at confrontation. We had a good conversation about what it is we expect from each other and how we could work together and move forward with it. And now he's honestly one of my favorite teachers because he's now knows who I am as a person and how to help me out in stressful situations and stuff. So I think you can't expect students to do good if you're not willing to put in, twice the amount of effort. I've seen in class Latinos, Chicanos, and as a Chicano, it's hard seeing your classmates being put down so much when you're a Chicano. And even though it's not you, it's like, well, if you're treating him that way, I can't imagine how you're going to treat me if I go out of place. I mean, our freshman year became a joke because this one student never showed up to class. And the times he did, teachers and advisors were making fun of him for it. So it's, why would he want to show up to class if every time he shows up, he's just being targeted by everyone, even his classmates, because the teachers made it seem like it was okay to make those jokes about that student. So I think if you want students to understand you and be sympathetic with you and empathetic and put themselves in your shoes, which a lot of us are this year and very understanding, you got to give us the same thing in return, or else it's not going to work like that. It's you put in the work, I'll put in the work. You respect me, I'll respect you. Even if I mess up, I'm still going to show up to your class because I respect you. And I know how you're feeling and you know how I'm feeling. So I just think communication, I mean, this is awesome. I mean, on page 18, it says responsibility should be on the adults in the district to be aligned, consistent, and accountable to ensure equitable responses to students' needs and behaviors, no matter their race, gender identification, or educational designation. And as a Chicano trans male at Silver Creek High School, it is very important to me that my teachers follow not only what's on here, but follow what it means to be a teacher on the CSTP, which I never knew was a thing. So, I mean, I don't think it's so hard to ask teachers to give us a little breathing room. We're teenagers. I know you are making us adults, but we're teenagers. Let us act like one once in a while. Thank you.
Thank you. Thomas?
Just before Thomas speaks, I want to say that the closest thing I've heard today that isn't even disagreement, but more observational, came from Dr. Wendy Stegman, when she just pointed to the reality that the larger the class, the more difficult to put into practice the additional interventions that the UBR speaks to, and that you can't interrupt the learning process for other students, and it's difficult to, to intervene in a restorative way, and that it helps to have advisors to support teachers. It helps to have more professional development with a common language and common understanding, classroom to classroom. And, the part that I'm still curious about, because in the past months, I've picked up random comments along the way that I all boil down to a perspective that says this is all well and good, but the realities in the classroom are such that this approach puts the safety of teachers at risk. Now, I don't know how to unpack that kind of a statement. I don't have enough understanding to unpack that kind of a statement, but as a policymaker, it makes me curious. Why would any teacher, and tonight we've been hearing a lot of supportive comments, a lot of comments in alignment with UBR. I'm in alignment with UBR. I was excited when I heard presentations over the months. I'm really grateful for this discussion today because it's added another dimension to it. But how do we respond to a comment that, while this is, something that we do want to create, what do we do about a teacher? And Dr. Wendy Stegman mentioned a teacher that she says was threatened by a student today, and that the teacher doesn't feel safe. And yet we're talking about a framework that calls for building relationships and restorative approaches, and we're recognizing the adolescent brain and the trauma-informed, approach. All of that collapses in an instant for a teacher that doesn't feel safe. And what's our response to that? So.
Go ahead, Thomas, please.
Now I'm starting to think about that for a second. Well, I guess I want to start off by saying that language is important to me. I think it's probably.
Cannot hear you well enough.
Sorry. I just want to start off by saying language is important to me, and I think it's important to everyone, especially when it's written down. And to that, or because of that, I kind of want to start by just thanking, like extending a gratitude to Associate Superintendent Marquez and Director Powell for, the repeated meetings that we went through to work out a lot of the language on this when, for problem areas that we had when it was presented to us. And so for that, a big thank you. And I hope, because I don't really have any problems with the UBR, the matrix as it is here. I think those have all been worked out. Some problems still do exist as it relates to the language in board policy, but I don't really feel like now is a good time to get into that because I want to give that process the same respect as was given to this, since the board, I don't think has even seen board policy yet. There's still time that, to engage in those conversations. So I don't really.
So if you're not gonna go into it now, can you at least name it so it's not so vague for me? When you say, you point to something else that needs.
Just language, just as like the UBR matrix you see today is not the UBR matrix that you would have seen 2 months ago. And so over the course of meetings where problem areas arose with language as it was presented has been revised, it's been amended based upon a whole vast amount of stakeholder input. And so that's where I just want to start off by saying anything I say from here on out should not be construed as a lack of support for the UBR matrix as it currently stands. But to your point, and to the point that Wendy was saying before, well, it is more difficult in the classroom. That's not an excuse to not do any of this stuff, but it is just something to keep in mind, the language that we're all talking about this with tonight. There's a lot of generalizations that are going around. And when you actually are put in that position, I'm just not sure how one, I don't think there's a lot of disagreement here in this room about the merits of the UBR as it exists. I do not like some of the language that is used to characterize certain things, but that's not really what's relevant to me right now. What I really wanted to say is that I hope after a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years of implementing this, we don't just look at the statistics as we are doing right now, because the data will change just based upon the new structure of the UBR. One of the great things that I do like about the UBR is how it gives actually more options, or has at least the potential to give more options to teachers in the classroom. Instead of just having 2 basic options as it relates to referring students for help, we have a referral to a social worker or a discipline referral. Those have traditionally been the 2 methods used. This at least opens up 2 additional options where you have an FYI referral, which I know is I guess it's always been part of Infinite Campus, but I never knew about it. The other one is a referral simply a referral to an advisor for support. It's not reported as a discipline referral. Good thing. But I just want to make sure that, in 2 years, when we look at statistics, they've decreased. Yes, we should expect that just given the new nature of how the UBR operates. And the point being is that the absence, not reporting the behavior is not the same thing as the absence of the behavior. And I don't want that to get lost in the future. Like if we see statistics that show a reduction, I want to make sure that that is also correlating to an actual reduction of the behavior, not necessarily on the student, but on as it relates to the process itself. Because I think you can't necessarily gauge that simply by looking at statistics. I'll just stop there for now, and if I have something else to say.
Member Chavez.
Thank you, Thomas, for your comment. I was hoping to, I really did not want to say much and just wanted to lean in. But I think it's important that I'm very clear about how I feel about certain things. One, I actually do think there is urgency in looking at policy. I think there is, it's important to look at this, be clear, move forward, make sure we have all the input and then we think through it very purposefully, especially as we come into this year. I think there's so much at stake. There's been a lot at stake, and now it's at another level. So I, for one, do think that we need to really make sure that everything is in place so that this holds. Not that this is not going to hold without, policy, but that's just my perspective. 2, I think it's very problematic that we say multiple times that some adults feel unsafe with our students. We have students here. We're talking about different ways to support our students. And as a student, if someone is saying adults in the room, especially adults with power, reiterating this fact, or not this fact, this this phrase, this feeling, this sentiment. It squashes me. I don't want to speak for students, but I could imagine how they're feeling. And I'm not trying to take away from teachers' experiences. I think it's just important. It's important that we speak in ways that are going to hold everyone to the best of our ability. For example, I understand that there are some adults that are struggling, right? Or that there are different levels of, I don't even know. But our words matter, and I'm sweating, I'm shaking. I'm bothered. My heart is beating really fast. And I can't even put the words. I put them out. I want all of us to be conscious of that. And again, I don't want to minimize and some teachers' experiences, but I do just want to bring consciousness to our words and the power that they have. And for me, what's underlying a lot of this is just support, just the amount of support that we all need to support our students to make this happen as a starting point. I think this is a starting point. The moment that we can operate in community, like I think a parent was saying, like that's when it's just like, yeah, that's the aspiration. But this is so baseline.
Thank you. Yes. All right. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Again, it helps to state names. I'm taking notes. I want to know who said what when I'm taking notes.
My name is Esmeralda Murillo. I'm the school social worker at Foothill High School. So Foothill High School is the continuation school of Eastside. So I definitely work with a different population than most of the students that are comprehensive site. I will just say right off the back, I love this population. This is my passion. This is the work that I was set to do. So when things happen to them and then they get to Foothill, I'm very thankful that things did not work out at the comprehensive site.
Can you get closer to your microphone, please?
Sorry. So I'm very thankful that things, closer, there. Sorry, can you hear me now? Yes, okay. I'm very thankful that things did not work out for our students at comprehensive sites because they come to Foothill and we are there to greet them and meet them where they're at, what they need. We start very baseline with them. I will just say this is the first year. I've been here for 7 years. This is the first year where we actually have like our valedictorian picture up on the wall. I have been asking for that since year one. And I'm like, how come we don't have it? Why don't we do that? And it's always been like, oh, they don't meet the qualifications. And then this last year, our principal, and I'm so thankful for her, she's like, it's just the highest GPA. So she finally got it up there. And I think that speaks volume as to where our students at Foothill come to us, where they're not valued at their other school sites, or they're not even known of at their other school sites. And they fall through these cracks, and we have big cracks, and no one's there. No, we can't save them all, but we can try. And I think that's where this restorative practices, that's where this community building, relationship building, that's where it is where it's not saying like you're going to have every single kid be perfect in your classroom. We're going to try to reach out to every single student. We're going to make the effort that freshman year, every single student, someone on that campus knows their name. It's really, I have like all these notes, but I'm just like listening to everybody, and we get students from all different backgrounds. We have foster youth, we have homeless youth, or McKinney-Ventos, we have probation youth that we work closely with. And it's really sad and it's really heartbreaking when they come to you. And I had 2 students and coming from other sites just 2 weeks ago. They're like, how do I get into school? And it's like, oh, you can refer. Well, I've never been on my campus, so I don't know who my counselor is. What do you mean? You've been on school, and yes, we've been distance learning, but these students have been with us since September, and you don't know who your counselor is. You don't know who Anybody is, no one's reached out to you. That's really sad and scary to hear from our students who are juniors or seniors coming to us, because we only take juniors and seniors. And so I think that this is, I think a parent said it, like, this is basic stuff. You can say hi to any kid, whether they're in your classroom or not. You can say hello to any parent as they come onto the campus. You can say, how can I help you? That doesn't take any extra effort. That doesn't, and I know like classroom management's a little bit other portion of it, but these are all basic things that we can do on our classroom, on our campus. And it's everybody. It's not just the social worker that says, hey, how are you feeling today? Hey, how are you doing today? Hey, how was your weekend? Like, I know we get a lot of kids and we have a lot of others, and we get those referrals, and we are the mental health therapists when something else is happening. But every person on our campus should be able to ask that question. Hey, how are you doing? Hello, it's good to see you. Every single person, from our attendance secretary at the front office to our janitors who are working with us, every single person should be able to have we should have the same expectation for every single person that serves our students. We thankfully at Foothill, we started last year. We had started right before distance learning took place, and then we carried it through distance learning, and then have been doing PD with Los Compadres Network, doing transformational learning and La Cultura Cura, which really focuses on what is our foundational purpose of how we want to meet our students. There's so many different like semantics, and I was talking to Sean about this when she asked me to be a part of this, and she's like, I was like, we're trying to get away from this term, and she's like, no, it's just this. But it's really, what is the foundation? What is our purpose? Because we as educators, we as social workers, we as counselors, we as advisors, as parents, we all have a purpose in this child's life. So what is our purpose? And understanding and knowing that this child has a purpose. They have a greater purpose than just sitting in your classroom and doing your work. And so I think that if we all believe this, and we all believe that this child is sacred, this child has a purpose, this child is deserving of respect, and we all start there, I don't think it's a really hard ask of teachers to ask a kid or say hi to a kid in the morning. I do know, and I will just speak from experience at Foothill, we have kiddos, like I will just say, like we have kiddos where it's like police come on campus and they're like, hey, we're gonna arrest this kiddo. Okay, what do you mean? This kiddo's the sweetest kid ever on campus. And yes, they committed this crime. But at campus, on our campus, we know him as a sweet kid who's coming to school, being supportive, doing their, always respectful, nothing wrong. Why am I going to see him differently for what he does outside in the community or does in another classroom? I should not be defining that student by what they do. It's not who they are, because we know who they are. We know that they're sweet kids. We know that they're respectful students. Yes, they made bad choices, but it's always that thing of, can I look at the students? Can I look beyond what is it, that EC Arms Code is on Infinite Campus, that all the teachers, and I know I'm not a teacher and I'm not in the classroom, so, and I know that things do happen in the classrooms, but if we all start here, I remember fights breaking out at Foothill. I remember like kids will be like, oh my God, Miss Esmeralda, somebody's gonna start fighting in the bathroom. Okay, like here I go. But this is heads up, right? Like they respect me enough to say, hey, I know you can intervene and I'm not gonna get in trouble for this. It's just that relationship building, or after something does happen, hey, like I'm gonna tell you, but don't rat me out. Okay, like let me get all this information from you. We have more cooperation, we have more buy-in from the students when we care about our students. And that is the hard part. And that is, I think at Foothill, the most frustrating part is that when our students come to us and they feel like nobody cares about them. When we are a district, we serve so many wonderful students, so many wonderful students. And I'm like, how can somebody not care about you? How come you could go 2 years at a whole comprehensive site and only have 4 credits because oh, that one teacher right there, that's the one who cared about you. Like one teacher out of 6 classes that they have every single year, like one teacher that took the chance to like get to know you that semester. And so like I said, like what the parents said best, this is basics. This is not like, if we can get this and we can have teachers understand, have staff understand, you can say hello to a student, you can care about the student, you can take the time to get to know your students. It changes your classroom dynamics when you do this work in the front, like front load it. Let me get to know my students. Let me get to know who they are, how they respond. Hey, what do I have to look out for? Our teachers doing the transformational learning, all of them, for the most part, are in line, and it's so wonderful and it's so good. And yes, they all have those concerns of like, hey, what happens when something does happen? But they are, how do we do this? How do we implement this? We know that the work that we're going to come into in August is going to be very different than when we were working March, what was it, 2020. It's going to look different. Our dynamics are going to be different. We're going to have to reteach students how to be students, how to sit in a classroom, how to sit in a chair. I'm going to be like, hey, I can't wear sweats to work every single day anymore. Like I have to change. Teachers are going to have to relearn how to be a teacher in a classroom and manage these classrooms. It's going to be a learning curve, but I think if we all have that basic caring, hey, like I care about you. I care about what you did this weekend. I care about that you're in my classroom and you actually do care. Like that's the big thing. It's like you actually have to care. It's gonna make a difference in the dynamics of your classroom. So yeah, so I really like that we're doing this work. And I think the basics is what we have to do before we even look at, like, I know like there's response circles and things like that. Like that work doesn't happen unless we do this basics of, hey, we're a community first. We're building this, this community, and everybody in Eastside is the same community. And when you are at Andrew Hill, for example, and I'm referring you to Foothill, it's because I care about you, not because, hey, get out of my school. It's, I'm gonna do this best for you because you know what, Andrew Hill didn't work out for you, Foothill can help you. So I think that is gonna be, that is a shift that we really need to come to, because unfortunately we do get those kids that it's like, oh, I don't even know who anybody on my campus is. I don't know. And then, you know, they could not show up at all, but for us, not to even call at all, not to even reach out to them, like they are students. So I know I spoke a lot, but that is how I feel. Thank you.
Madam President,
Thank you. Yes.
could we take a 5-minute break?
Yes.
We've gone over 2 hours and I really don't want to miss anything.
It'll
but-
help. Yeah, I mean, I agree. And don't y'all lose your thoughts that have had your hands up, because I'm eager to hear. Right.
So I take 5-minute breaks. Right now, 8:50, so we should come back 8:55. All right. The stress.
And I am finding this incredibly valuable and I'm appreciating so much what I'm hearing. Thank you.
Can we all come back? Probably gonna want to finish this up at 9:15. Can we come back, please? Hello. I know it's getting late, and I like to finish it up. You know, at least, you know, maybe 9:15 or 9:20, because right now we are 8:56 already, and I know we've been have a conversations for more than 3 hours. So so I'm gonna, okay, the next person is Alex Villa. Please.
Thank you, Alex Villa. I just wanted to make a couple of brief points after hearing some of the conversation, which is very, very rich and very thought-provoking and encouraging, to be quite honest. the concept of safety, and of course, you never want to remove somebody's feelings as it relates to safety, but I really do appreciate AB's very eloquent mention of mutual respect and the bi-directional necessity for relationships. And Trustee Chavez, the importance that you're elevating when it comes to the concept of safety and what that means as an adult professional in the business, right? And I'm only going to speak from my personal experience. I've been in probably some of the some would consider the most dangerous neighborhoods in the county. And I'll tell you, my safety always started with understanding my relationship with power and authority. And so understanding that the person that I'm going to see or visit or supervise or whatever the circumstance is, my relationship with them, even though I'm supervising them, is actually more important than anything else. The progress they make, the engagement that we have, the relationship that we execute is really born out of a mutual respect. I'm going to respect you. I do have expectations. I have a job to do, and you in turn, have a level of respect that I expect you to display towards me. Not that long ago, we engaged in what was called the Reimagining Juvenile Justice Initiative. And in that initiative, we talked about the developmental relationships framework. And really there's 4 or 5 key components: express care, challenge growth, provide support, share power, and expand possibilities. Those are 5 key areas that if you execute that in your relationship building, you're going to go very, very far in not only building relationships, but shifting entire cultures.
I didn't write fast enough. Care and then something and then share power, expand possibilities.
The first one, sir, was express care.
Okay.
Challenge growth. Provide support. Share power. And expand possibilities.
Thank you.
In my work, we've shifted a lot of paradigms recently, and one of them is progress, not perfection. We're looking at our young people, and I recently had a couple conversations with Dr. Sean about words mattering and the idea that they're students. They're not probation students. They're students. In fact, they're scholars. And the more we treat them as that, the more they will rise to that expectation in one way or another. And so even myself, I'm learning as we go and we continue this process, but it's always about progress, not perfection. There was a time, where you have to do every single thing, check every box, and then you get rewarded by, getting off probation or whatever the circumstance may be. But, maybe that's not always the best approach. Maybe it's when we see progress, we see no issues, we see somebody going to school, somebody engaged, having conversations with us, really navigating the world better than they did 8 months ago or whatever it may be. So the idea that we are looking for the progress versus perfection is really, really important. And the idea that the last point, one of my last points was, be sure to layer in qualitative data when you talk about data, because I've learned the lesson that the numbers are the numbers, yes, but that qualitative piece where you're learning about people's experience, what it means to them and their families, we don't do enough of collecting that and really relaying that. Whenever there's quantitative, we should match that with qualitative. And then from a pro-social standpoint, I think it really is important for our school, from a district level and education level, look at the things that kids want. Sports. I'll tell you, without high school sports, without track and field and cross country, I would have never graduated high school. I could say that without any reservation. How many students who have challenges behaviorally and otherwise, they want to do sports. They want to, maybe they're transitioning schools for whatever reason. They don't have the grade point average. They haven't been at the school long enough, whatever the circumstance may be. Why are we so rigid with an activity that's pro-social that they want to be engaged in? And does every school have the opportunity to participate in the way that they should be able to? The other thing is, and this is just it's a very current example, how equitable are we being across the schools within this district? Some schools, I have a graduating senior, and I know my senior is a little upset about some of what she knows is occurring on other campuses that are not occurring maybe on her campus. Events, even a little event. But these kids have sacrificed so much for a year and a half. Why can't they do this, that, or whatever in a safe way where they hear and they know for a fact that other schools are doing little things like that? So when you talk about equity across the district as a whole, it's not only about equity in this context, it's about equity in everything. Opportunities, pro-social opportunities, and honoring students and honoring their families and making sure that they have opportunities across the board so they all can have a similar experience and go on to do great, great things that we know they're all capable of. That was just my final thoughts.
Thank you, Alex. Thomas, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't think anyone disagrees that relationships are a mutual, you have a relationship both ways. I don't think that's where the issue lies. You can't always force a relationship though. When you have a classroom, it's kind of difficult to tell a teacher in a given moment to go out and form 32 plus relationships on a whim like that with a student who you might have a legitimate concern to be afraid of. And this is in response to what you said, Board Member Chavez. I was a little troubled that you were troubled over a teacher who expressed concern for safety in a classroom. Now, let me give you a specific example because we've been talking with a lot of generalizations tonight. Last school year, the 2019-2020 school year, I had a student in my class who was in juvenile hall, who had just returned from juvenile hall because they were locked up for beating up their teacher, physically beating the hell out of their teacher. Not only was this kid coming out of juvenile hall, he was an active member in a gang. Every time that I had a conversation, well, I shouldn't say every time, we had conversations, and he expressed the position to me that he doesn't expect to be alive as an adult. Me as a teacher having that student in my class, it is not unreasonable for me to have a bit of fear of that student, given those circumstances. Especially several years previous in this district, there was a teacher who was assaulted by a student. It is not an insignificant concern for a teacher to want to feel safe in their classroom. And if you want teachers to implement this policy faithfully, you cannot dismiss their concerns when they arise.
You want to respond? Because I have one of the students, I believe, want to.
Well, why don't you have Member
I'd like
Chavez
to have Ms.
respond?
Gonzalez go. She has not had an opportunity to speak tonight.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's okay. I can wait if the student wants to speak or if Ms. Solis, I know she was raising her hand before I was. Okay, okay. So, part of what I wanted to respond to in regards to the UBR and collectively working as a community towards equitable opportunities for all students, all families, all teachers and staff, right? I believe Mr. Villa said it for me before I said it in a more eloquent manner, but let me go back. My name is Jessica Gonzalez. I am one of the counselors at Mount Pleasant High School. I was also an original member of the first Stakeholder Equity Committee, where we did a lot of the work here. And I started off as a parent. My daughter graduated in 2019. And it was tough to see some of the data, right? But I also know that in between the numbers, you know, I'm also an alumni from this district, from Mount Pleasant specifically. I had experiences. I have 3 younger brothers who went through that same school as well. And so they had their own experiences. And being a product of this district of Mount Pleasant, and seeing how far we've come, right? Because of the reflective work we're doing, that as a system, as adults, we evolve, right? It's hard for things to stay the same. I know we have a hard time with change, but this UBR and everything that's being put into place with MTSS, there are opportunities for reflection for us as the adults in the system, and the kind of impact that we have on our students, our community, our family members. We do hold a huge responsibility. And so when I speak to this tool helping us be more reflective as the adults, because as adults, we do make mistakes, and it's important that we are held accountable for those mistakes, that we even acknowledge them with our students, with any kind of issue that we may come across with, right? I think of as a parent that I am as well, how I have evolved as a young mother to the mother that I am now. You know, things weren't always the same. As an educator, the way I have evolved as an educator, the way I first came into education and how I thought things had to work, how it was a little bit more black and white. I'm very transparent with that, right? But as you go, you learn. Your experiences help shape and form your thoughts. My son asked me the other day, because they're doing a lot of social emotional learning through his school. He's 12 years old. He said, "Mom, do you have an open mindset or do you have a closed mindset?" Well, what do you think, son? You know, when we have problems, when we have disagreements, what do you think? I think you have an open mindset, right? So as adults, we model. When I make mistakes, when I raise my voice, I don't like that tone, Mom, right? Yes, I get frustrated. Yes, I get upset. Yes, I get impatient, right? What am I teaching my son? Right? And as the adult, again, in a system that is supposed to be pro-student, yes, we as the adults are just as important, but we are the living role model, the example, right, of how to solve problems when we come across problems, when we have disagreements. So being able to create these equitable opportunities for all students is not just, you know, it's all going to depend on the UBR, but with the implementation of MTSS, tier 1 interventions, how can we implement these interventions for all students? These are for all students, not just students with ISTs, 504s, IEPs, right? Why can't we provide a break in between a class session for all our students in the class, not just for our students, right? So imagine the difference we would make, and the decreased amount of behavioral issues we might have with a simple break, or with an icebreaker, whatever it is. There are so many opportunities for us to move forward in a more reflective manner, and not be so stuck on, I need to have control as the adult in the way things are worded or they're said. You know, this is an opportunity for growth, and with growth and change, there are pains, right? Because it's hard. When we've been brought up a certain way, I'm a product of a system, right? That kind of trained me to have a certain thought process, right? And so being a first generation Chicana as well, I mean, there are so many factors that played a role in the person that I am today. And so with that, I hope that we can move forward and not take, you know, specific, I don't know how to say this or how to word this. Maybe I'll just end there. But that as the adults, we do, our words have a lot of power, what we say and how we say it. So again, this is just another opportunity for us to be more reflective and move forward in a good way.
Thank you. I think I want to ask Lucila. She's been raised her hand for a while now. So I want to call Lucila. Are you still here? She's gone. Oh, okay.
It looks like she may have gotten off.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, we
And Member
yes,
Chavez.
Member Chavez. I know that we tried to set up about 9:25 is the latest, so each one probably will say a few more minutes and we wrap up. I know it's getting late also, So yeah, please go ahead.
Microphone.
Microphone.
I just wanted to say that I really do appreciate teachers. We have teachers in our family. We've taught ourselves. My husband worked in the educational system before going to probation. So I completely agree with the teacher should feel safe in the classroom, and that is troubling to feel like someone doesn't feel safe. But I also want to highlight as well, equally as important, is that students can feel unsafe too. And it doesn't come with someone threatening their life. But when you have someone that's an adult in a position of power and authority, and that person may not know, maybe not because they're trying to hurt that person, student, but maybe they don't know how to address the situation that's happening in class, or maybe comments that other students are making, or maybe they've unintentionally said something or possibly intentionally said something to a student, that student can also feel unsafe. And I know that from personal experience as well. And so when you put the idea of safety, it doesn't always have to come in that you're being threatened with you're being threatened with violence, physical violence. It could also just be the idea that you don't feel comfortable, you don't feel safe, you don't feel like the person that's in charge of that classroom has your back, and that people are allowed to say what they want. I'll give an example. There was a situation in the school where there was the idea of deportation coming up. And students were like, yeah, deport, deport, deport. And the teacher had become involved in that. How many students in there might not feel comfortable and safe in that classroom? To them, that is their physical well-being, their mental well-being. And so as much as it's important for teachers, which I completely agree, we also need to look at what does unsafe feel like to students. And I really wanted to mention that, you know, the students that we're speaking today did so eloquently. They have so much more vocabulary than we did, having gone to school at that age. They've addressed more issues. They're more open in their dialogue. They're looking at social justice. They're looking at so many different issues that maybe we just didn't have the vocabulary for at that age. I would recommend bringing them into the conversation. And maybe also there's maybe students who maybe don't speak as eloquently, but have a lot to say. That should be also included. And not to forget about students who are in certain schools where maybe their population, students of color, where maybe their population isn't as big as in other schools. Those students are also in need of some attention and to be looked at. So I hope that they don't get forgotten in those pockets as well.
Thank you. One member, oh, one more, Maria Soros. Yeah, go ahead.
Just really quickly, I know that it is definitely, and I would agree with, I'm sorry, Miss, I couldn't, Villa, with Miss Villa, on the fact that all of us need to be able to feel safe, right? It is about safety. Safety is important for all of us, but I do think that there is context to everything as well. You know, when I think about my days back in the classroom, right, I served as a teacher for many years at Yerba Buena High School, right? And I've kept in touch with many of my students from back in the day. In fact, Adrian Baeza was one of our students at YB when I was there teaching. Whenever they, you know, they want to visit, they say, hey, when can I meet you at a game, right? Because they know I'm always at the soccer games, I help coach, assist. And they come and visit, they want to visit, they want to just chat, right? They never come back to me and ask me or say, hey, I remember what a dependent clause and independent clause is because you taught it so well, like yours, right? They never tell me that. They always come back and want to hear about how my Alejandra is doing, or how, you know, it's a connection, right? It's a human connection that they want to make, right? Or maybe they need some support, or they want to talk about something that's going on in their lives. So I do want to say that it is about safety, but we do have to consider, you know, context as well. And the fact that behavior is always communication. Behavior is communication. And so what is happening, and how do we work with with students, and not do things to students, right? So how do we do that? So I just want to make sure that I mention that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Maria Solis. Any other hand raised? Any member Lorena Chavez?
I just want to cut this because I really want to make sure that we take really this time to hear all the voices as much as possible. It's clear that there's misalignment and miscommunication to Ms. Solis's point here. And so I will follow up with y'all to make sure that we have a more extensive, deeper conversation. Because again, I am hearing clear misalignment and miscommunication between what I was trying to say and what was understood. So we will continue that, but I want to make sure that
give us a thing a little bit right now.
this is not about going back and forth. It's not about who's right or wrong. It's about
But
really
it's about
digging deep.
enlightening people, and I'm feeling very enlightened tonight with the various comments that are being offered. Maybe I could be enlightened by your comment. I was enlightened by your first comment.
I think Mariela and Ms. Solis really spoke to the core
They did.
of what is top of mind, top of heart for me, right? And what else could I add right now? I'll say this and then that's it. We need to, I don't, it's not about me.
Well, but it is about perspectives, and different people bring different perspectives, and they really help. You know?
Yeah,
And this is kind of like the nub of where the lack of full alignment seems to be in corners of the organization. And why wouldn't we deal with it? Why wouldn't we speak to it? Why wouldn't we come to a common understanding about it? I heard perspectives after you spoke and other comments were made. I've taken a lot of notes. It's really helped to hear what was said, you know. But if you want to add something, you've been a teacher, you've been a principal, you're an educator, you know, you're speaking from experience as well as from your passion for equity.
Yeah.
This is not about pressure. This is not about, you know, my professional experience. This, I spoke as a human, right? I think the main headline is words matter. And because of that, I could see how different interpretations could have happened. I see some people received it as it was meant to, others did not. And for me, it's not just about giving my perspective, it's about diving deep and getting to the core, to the root of what is happening. And that will take hours. So with that, I'm going to cut my comment and I'm going to invite others to continue giving their perspective.
Yeah, I'd like to invite Bruce Nguyen. I think he's a representative for Student Governing Board. We didn't have a chance to talk tonight. Go ahead, Bruce.
I just wanted to say that one of my fellow colleagues, Francine, also wanted to speak. So I'll yield my time to her.
Hi, my name is Francina Stranero. I'm a senior from James Lick High School. And something that I've heard a lot throughout the last couple of hours is people talking about students' issues, like from a student's perspective, seeing this injustice happen at our school, from the teacher's perspective of what they think they should do. And coming from a student whose mom teaches at the school she goes to, I've been able to see a little bit of both worlds, and something I think that could really help with a lot of the things and issues that we see on campus and even like mainly everywhere is increasing the amount of transparency between students and the adults, regardless of who they are and what their position is. And not even just transparency in general, comprehensive transparency where students are fully aware and comprehend what it is they're being told. Because I've been in the position where as a student, a teacher would come up to me and be like, hey, we need you in this meeting as a student representative. And they would ask me in that meeting, oh, do you understand this? And while I would say yes, I really would not. And making those uninformed decisions for my school is not something I want to happen. So I think something that should be considered by everyone is increasing the amount of transparency between students and whatever adult is on campus, and ensuring that students are fully aware of what's going on and understanding decisions that adults make so they don't feel so inclined to act out and speak up and cause problems. And that is all I wanted to say.
Awesome. Thank you, Francine. Bruce, do you like to say something before we close up? I'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, sure. So I've been listening this whole time about this whole conversation. I thank everyone for sharing their sentiments, and it really shows the importance of communication and having that perspective, right? That perspective. When I look at this policy, right, I think about my past 4 years of high school and where it's where what progress has been made, right? And visually, I can see progress being made in my classrooms. One of my teachers, an English teacher, he has demonstrated a lot of skill in utilizing the UBR. And one of the things that I've seen him do is always talk to people, always ask how they're doing, always ask about what are the circumstances they've been facing, right? And some of the stuff is in private, right? And some of the stuff is about in reaction to what students have been doing. If students have been tardy, you'll go ahead and speak to them about why they're tardy, right? It's always good to have like someone there to understand the predicament that you're in. And this goes along with Mr. Villa's point about having like a supportive figure, right? And having a really great effect in a child's development. And coincidentally, my final is about juvenile justice. And I had a whole project about how like teens are sort of reckless because of what happens in their frontal lobes and how that might apply with their families, or if there is a lack of family, what they might do in reaction to that. They might lash out, right? And I feel like that's some of the perspective that the district does need to understand. There's also the science, right? But there's also the ethos of a person and where they come from, their backgrounds. So we want to have that clarity when we do talk about the UBR. And moving ahead, students are a really big player, a really big influence to this, because we are going to be impacted by this. And when students are being considered, in discussions about their behavior, it should be noted that one of the biggest influence, to a student when they do something is other students, right? Other students influence other students, mostly in good ways, right? But there's also bad ways. But we can use that energy, right? We can use the power of students to ensure that they are on the right track. And what I mean by that, right? I'm serving as a student board member here. I'm also serving in the student governing board, and I see that potential, right, to speak to our principals, speak to our administrators about how to get more students involved in the process of policymaking, and also reaching out to students who haven't had their voices heard. And along with the associated student body, students that represent students on their campuses, we are the key factors into connecting educators to students. And we want to have that positive environment in the end, because we want to have that self-containing cycle of students helping other students, right? So that educators, administrators don't really have to step in as much. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about this, right? And we can all be role models to each other. So what I'm trying to say is that we should definitely put more of those resources into students, the hands of students, right? Because we have the power to influence each other, and in student-led organizations as well. And we can train students in these values, right? The UBR. It's not just something that's in the classroom, right? It's like a tool. It's a virtue. So if you truly want to see positive change in our classrooms, just put more students in that position of empowerment. And that's my point. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Bruce. Very articulate your point of view. I know we've been discussed almost 3 hours, more than 3 hours.
So, Madam President, we do have one online written comment, and
Okay.
then I would like to give staff the opportunity
Sure.
to potentially address Board Members Herrera question around what could lead to a teacher just saying this document itself lends itself perhaps into not feeling safe within a classroom, potentially give an idea there. before we adjourn. So
Okay.
this public comment comes from Charles Fowler, staff member. What is the district commitment with money, training, and staffing to further commit to this change to restorative practices? Teachers need training, space, compensation for committing to these changes, and most sites have a 3-person admin team and 2 advisors. So 5 people, or 4.5 if the admin is shared with an SBN. How can 5 implement a process that is going to take much more time and energy? There is discussion of an MTSS position opening. Is that going to support this work? Is that temporary? Even a 6-person team cannot support all necessary parts. If there is one major fight with multiple parties and we're running various circles intervention spaces, we simply don't have the people to do this work without an investment in the time teachers will ultimately put towards these shifts. Advisors are already some of the most overworked members of ESTA. We need to at least double the amount of advisors at each site, even consider starting this work thoroughly. That's the end of public
Could you
written comment.
post that in the chat thing? I'd like to copy it.
Yes, we can do that.
All right, go ahead, Dr. Powell.
Yeah, let me just say a few things and I'll pass it to Associate Superintendent Marquez. I think it's really important to address the comments around safety. Starting with defining what we mean by safety, because I've heard the word used interchangeably in this space to refer to emotional safety, mental safety, and physical safety. And I think we have to name that first, because when we think about how we respond to that and support that, that looks very different. I'd also like to name that there is, when we talk about physical safety, like I've worked in probably some of the most dangerous environments. I've been child welfare popping up at people's door, like I need to take your child type deal. Like, and I can say definitively that there are moves, there is professional development that helps us to understand how blow-ups happen, so that 1, we have the ability to prevent them, and 2, when they do happen, what are the moves or strategies that we can take to keep ourselves safe? Physically safe is what I'm referencing right now. One of those trainings, we have had trainer of trainers. It is called Therapeutic Crisis Intervention and Supports. We have a number of teachers, student advisors who took that training or actually trained to train other people in therapeutic crisis interventions and supports. And we hope that as part of the work, we are able to expand those trainings as well. Because I think, again, that's really important work that needs to be done. The other piece that I want to make sure that people understand is this tool is not intended to impede or prevent anyone's physical safety. We have a commitment as well as an obligation and a legal responsibility to ensure that we keep students and staff physically safe. And in policy, there are specific ed codes that outline in specific situations where there's no progression, there's no discussion, like the action is outlined for us by law. Some of those include bringing a firearm to school, brandishing a knife at school, selling a controlled substance at school, sexual assault or battery, and possession of explosives. Those are all non-negotiables. If you do them, you will be referred for an expulsion hearing. That's not my choice. That's not the parent's choice. That's not the staff's choice. That's the law. And so I think it's important to name that as well. And then I think the other pieces, as we talk about those physical safety pieces, sometimes there is a need to address physical safety by temporarily removing students from an environment. What does that look like, and how do we re-enter those students into the environment is just as critical in terms of engaging students and making sure that they still feel seen and heard on our school campuses. And the last thing that I think is just important to name about physical safety in context of the UBR is that category E specifically says behaviors targeted at others and interfering with safety or the destruction of property. That does not fall into the blue classroom managed area at all. If that occurs, it will be referred to an administrator for a higher level of support that comes with both consequences and support. It's not an either or, it's a both and. And I think that's just important to note, is that this is not a process that will always be A, B, C, and D. the behavior that we're looking at and the safety, the physical safety that is connected to that behavior determines where in this matrix that particular incident falls. So it is very possible for a student to engage in a behavior on a first offense, be referred to the office, and then for the administrator to respond to that behavior. And so I think that's important to be heard. I think it's important for our teachers to know that your safety, your physical safety matters, and for our students to know that their physical safety matters across the board for everybody.
So where do verbal threats fall in that matrix?
So it depends. So according to Ed Code, there's distinctions between verbal threats. You have kind of your traditional, and really the language speaks to the reasonability of like the actual threat being carried out. For instance, you have kids that will be on campus and they'll be mad and they'll be like, I'm about to F you up out of anger, right? And so yes, it's a threat in the midst of that anger, but then when you go through that de-escalation process and you really sit down and talk to the kids, they never had an intention to get into a fight at all, right? And then you have other incidents where when you come down during the de-escalation, they have every intention to do that, and at which point we take higher level actions. And the one that I think is really important to name, because I think it's one that students want to hear explicitly, is when you make threats that are related to protected classes, sex, gender, race, etc. That is actually covered under Title IX and UCP. So there's a whole supplemental process where we take those types of behaviors really seriously, where the student can actually, there's actually two concurrent separate investigations going on into those matters. There's the one that occurs in student services, which of course our consequences could be, you know, suspensions and things like that. But there's also a subsequent investigation being conducted by our Director of Equity and Inclusion that looks at how does that relate to the federal policies of Title IX as well as uniform complaint.
That was really helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. I know that this is very deep
Teresa, gonna say
conversation.
something?
Teresa, would you like to say something, Teresa? Oh, okay. All right. I appreciate administrator, staff, you know, stakeholder, from teachers, from parents, you know, from the, you know, social worker or any other, you know, student have been contributed to this conversation. And it's really opened a lot of stuff that I'm learning. And I would understand a little bit more in depth as much as right now. But one thing is I want to share this with you that if I'm in my country, Vietnam, the most highest respect in Vietnam are teachers. Highest respect is as comparing with parents. So it's not the two culture that I can see that, you know, in here we much more open up. We much more have that the dialogue, the conversation, so we can help support our student. But in the different world, it's not another way that when you look into how can you support teacher, how can you support staff, and how can you support student. So overall, I'm learning, and I'm really appreciate all of the hard work and all the time that everyone put in tonight. And I think that's June 3rd that we will bring it back to our board to make a decision. And I think it's we still gonna amend it as the time we go along, and we make a policy maker. And I think it's you know, we hear from everyone, we hear from different stakeholder and different perspective. So I think that this dialogue will be continue. Hopefully that we want to open up maybe later on in a year, and when we gonna look back to see how can we work together and build up the relationship and mutual respect. That's all. Board Member Herrera.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to express my appreciation for each one of you who came here tonight, and to our staff in how they presented, you know, more information and anchored it in a very strong way. And I have appreciated and admired the different presentations over the months from our administration on this UBR, but this brings another dimension to it. This kind of conversation and dialogue and interchange gives it more. I mean, there's people who said things tonight in a way that opened my ears more. You know, I've always been supportive of this, but I want to drill down. I always want to drill down, especially when there's a decision point. And this has been extraordinarily helpful, and I'm so grateful for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Doe.
First, I want to thank staff for the incredible hard work, as I mentioned earlier, but I want to thank our parents and all the stakeholders and SS and CSEA for being here and offer your input. You have enlightened me. You know, I started this process very supportive of UBI, and I continue to do so, but there are thoughts and presented in a way that I honestly have not thought about. And I want to say kudos to our students. If you want to know how great this school district is, don't look at this side of the table, look at the students. I mean, oh my God, too bad AB have left, but I want to tell her she didn't go places. The intelligence and the thought process. I'm sorry, I apologize. I did not know. Thank you for clarifying that. This is incredible. When you look at our students, I know Eastside Union is far greater than most people realize. And this is the secret, you know, this is our secret. We want to share that secret with the world. So I do want to recognize some of the things that I hear today. And I know this, I wrote like 15, 20 pages, so I'm not going to be able to do all that, but I did want to give a quick sample of the things that I hear from all of you today. And I apologize if I missed some of you, but I want to talk about the sword of Oak Grove, the relationship building with the students that Mr. Michael McCoy spoke earlier. I want to talk, I appreciate the comment and appreciate the approach of the trauma-informed practice or trauma-informed approaches. They talk about the adolescent brain development and what I think Bruce called the frontal lobe. And wow, my God, I'm only on page 1. so I'm gonna skip this, but I want to express how incredibly appreciate how enlightened I feel that you brought things that I have not thought of. And I want to acknowledge Mr. Thomas Brittendahl about your stories and how important that is and how we want to recognize how protect our teacher safety. And I think Dr. Powell addressed that. So I will not talk about the next 18 pages so that you can all go home. But I do want to let you know I did hear, and I appreciate, I'm very grateful that you spent 3.5 hours with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Chavez.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, express my gratitude to everyone here that was able to make it in person and our online. This felt like a really great conversation, especially in the moments of tension. And welcome to my world when I'm super raw. I don't know what the heck I'm going to say half of the time, but I feel something in my gut and in my heart, and I say it. And I hope our students take away that that's okay. And even our adults, we're always growing, right? We're always learning. Yeah, this one of the, aside from the beautiful conversation and dialogue and tension and all the feelings, I'm leaving with an opportunity to continue conversation with a number of people. And I'm very grateful because I think that's what's important, right? That we continue the conversation, that we continue pushing ourselves, that we hear each other and we move forward together, holding each other. And I know that, at least I'll speak for myself, that is my commitment.
I think Mr. Alex Villa said something like that, similar to what you just said, express care and challenge growth.
Villa is my maiden name, by the way, so Chavez by my husband, Owie.
Provide support, right?
Board Member Patty Cotizi, do you have any last word?
Well, I echo the thanks to the staff and to all of our stakeholders here tonight, especially, well, of course, especially the students. It's always so profound to hear from you. But I really want to thank the parents as well, because we don't hear from you enough. So I'm really grateful for your sharing. I also want to acknowledge that Kenya Edison has been with us, and she was, a key in setting some of the foundation for this work. And so just thank you, Kenya. And someone else I want to acknowledge, and now I forgot. Anyway, thank you. Oh, I wanted to acknowledge the IT team. Thank you, Randy and your team, for making it possible for me to be here. This is actually just extraordinary, the way this technology works. It's like almost just like being there. So thank you. Thank you. Please extend my gratitude to your team.
All right. Okay. Meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Have a good
Thank you,
Memorial
everyone.
Weekend.